Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. A very warm welcome to all of you. Today, we'll be hosting a conference on Sri Guru Teghbahadar Sahib's 400th Parkash Utsav. My name is Jasjeet Singh, and I'll be the host for the conference today. We're going to be spending the next few hours together and listening to some thought-provoking and insightful talks by our speakers on Guru Teghbahadar Sahib. So just wanted to give you a flavor on how the day will flow today. We'll begin with a short introduction and a welcome from our chair of the Sikh Research Institute, Jaswinder Singh Ji. Followed by that, we'll have Harinder Singh, who will be our first speaker. And Dr. Ishmeet Kaur will also be giving a presentation. At that point, we'll have a half-hour discussion. And during any of that time, if you have any questions, please feel free to include them in the chat. And we'll be sure and try to answer as many questions as we can. After a short break, we'll have Surinder Pal Singh and Jasleen Kaur who will be presenting as speakers. And we'll have discussions subsequently after each of those presentations. I'll be following that up with a discussion with Inni Kaurchi and her talk, and we'll be taking questions as we go along for that as well. As I mentioned before, please make sure and include your questions in the chat so we can make sure to get to them. So we begin with Jaswinder Singh Ji, the chair of the Sikh Research Institute. He's the founder and CEO of Extria, a data analytics company based here in the New Jersey area and in India. I want to share with you what he said when he was appointed as the chair in 2017. And from what I know of Jaswinder Singh Ji, these words still stand today. He remarked, "There are many opportunities for awakened Sikhs to make an impact on the world, both within the Sikh community and in the context of the broader world. The inspiration, learning, and connection with Shabad that SikhRI enables is unique, powerful, and sorely needed. What SikhRI does is vital, and to be part of it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Jaswinder Ji, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for your leadership. And now the floor is yours.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome all of you to the special conference commemorating the 400th Parkash Purab of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib. We are still in the pandemic mode, but thanks to technology, we are here together to celebrate this unique historical milestone. The speakers and the audiences are across many time zones, making this indeed a global celebration. Thank you to one and for all for taking time to be here. Jasjeet Singh, thank you for the warm and generous introduction, and a profound thanks for being such an incredible supporter of SikhRI. Jasjeet serves on our advisory council, and you can see he also gets tasked to do multiple things at SikhRI. Jasjeet, I truly appreciate your dedication to SikhRI, knowing fully well the pressures and responsibilities you face as an executive director of a major global biopharmaceutical company and participating in so many community events when not trekking. So thank you. I'm humbled and privileged to chair this global nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide educational resources to Sikhs to lead a Guru-inspired life. For over 10 years, I have been connected with SikhRI at multiple levels and have witnessed the organization's steady growth. And like many of you, my family and I have benefited greatly from SikhRI's programs such as Soji, Sidak, the online courses, the articles, the webinars, and the books. The day-to-day long workshops have made a significant impact on me. I'm particularly excited about the Guru Granth Sahib project, which SikhRI has undertaken to make this infinite wisdom accessible worldwide. After the conference, I hope that you will continue to engage with SikhRI content and become part of the SikhRI family, either as a volunteer or a financial supporter. Like you, I too am looking forward to hearing from the speakers. So Jasjeet Singh, let's get the program rolling. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you, Jasvinder Singh Ji. Welcome now to an old dear friend. Harinder Singh, you and I go way back. If you might indulge me for a second to introduce, give someone a background. Harinder Singh, Mamaji, and my father were dear friends, and they are still dear friends after 50 years plus in the US. And I wanted to share the personal anecdote of the inspiration you've given me, Harinder. When Harinder arrived, he was an Amritdhari Sikh. This was back in the 80s. I was a clean-shaven Sikh. Harinder Singh went to an American high school as a practicing Amritdhari Sikh and in college. And during that time, as through your inspiration, I have also transformed, and obviously with the Kirpa of the Guru, transformed myself from what I was, a clean-shaven, off-the-rail Sikh, to where I am today. So from a sincere thank you for that inspiration and that continued inspiration today, Harinder. So these are things that are those personal experiences, are also ones that lead us into our religious ways. And your expression and living of SikhRI have had a significant impact on my attraction and love with SikhRI. So thank you. And you've also had a broad impact on the Panth. And through your many Panthing engagements, your establishment and development of multiple Sikh institutions, including being a co-founder of Punjab Digital Library and the Sikh Research Institute, among others. Obviously, we can all Google that and Harinder's background, but as a short introduction, I also want to let you know some informal things, that he is a stickler for coffee and the way he likes it. He's a food connoisseur and an avid reader and film critic, among many other things beyond the Panthic adventure. So welcome, Harinder Singh Ji.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for that kind introduction. And actually, the greatness is all of the gurus. We are just fellow travelers.
Thank you. Anything else you wanted to add about the personal items from your end?
Well, you know, I remember when I first met you, you were actually the Grateful Dead fan. That's what I remember. And the journey in Kansas in the Midwest started, and it has taken us all over the globe. And at some point, we reconnected in East Coast in New Jersey. And one of the things which is coming to my mind right now is, you know, there's a statement in Guru Granth Sahib where it says, Nadiya Vaha Vichhaniya Mela Sanjogi Ram, that there are different streams, you know, literally referring to the water flows and different kinds of it, but we can say there are different streams of consciousness. At some point, they do come together and reconnect as well.
And what a perfect segue into the question, because that reconnection of streams of consciousness, tell us during this time how we can do that in our lives and how you view this 400 Parkash Purab at the Panthic level as well as at the individual level.
Sure. So at the Panthic level, I think the answer is very, very clear, because the things which are clear and simple, they're hardest to implement. But it's very clear at the Panthic level that our job is to continue the mission of the Guru. That's what Sikhs do. You know, in Gurbani, it says, Guru is the ocean and we Sikhs are the rivers. So our job is to continue the mission of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib. And what we learn from his life is very clear, that our source of strength remains Bani, which is articulated for us in Guru Granth Sahib. And his own experiences are available to us, so we need to further those. He also knows that the realities we live in, and he lived in the realities where Amritsar was under siege by the corrupt. You know, we call them Mahants at the time. Today we will call them caretakers. How to deal with that, how to create Anandpur at a Makhowal level, and how to create the first diaspora. So this connection is there from the Guru, that he created the first diaspora center in Patna, Bihar. So our work is, regardless of whether we are in the homeland or in the diaspora, and we must be very aware of who is furthering the Guru's agenda, how do we continue to further the Guru's mission, and that's it. It really is connect to the source through Bani and make sure we remain relevant to the communities we live in light of the Guru's principles.
Thank you. And one of the things that obviously we're doing at the individual level, and also as you've described in the diaspora at the institutional level, we've seen many weaknesses in the institutional engagement to spread the words of inspiration. What can institutions do in a better way to spread the stream of consciousness with Teghbahadar Sahib to the world?
Sure. I think the institutions, and sometimes we say, these things are related to Western influence or other influence. I want to say I'm speaking this out of any complexes because I operate in both in the East and the West, India and America and other places. Even Guru period, we see this. Institutions' job, which we need to revive again, is not to be furthering what is status quo. So if institutions wants to be relevant, they need to be thinking about the next things. Guru Teghbahadar Padsha did not just continue what Guru Nanak started and the next 8 Gurus did. He created the next institution. He looked at the relevant issues, whether it had to do with doing mediations in Assam or whether it had to do with answering the call of the distressed Brahmins and the Pandits from the Kashmir. And at the same time, figuring out how to deal with this sort of disharmony and disloyalty within the Sikh community. So institutions' job is this, not to just maintain the status quo, but come up with the next solution, come up with the next idea, the next institution. And this is how the current generations get inspired because they see that you're not philosophizing the things. You are reminding things from history and Gurbani, so you're relevant to the current scenario. So today it would mean this is March 2021. What are the issues? If the institutions in India, they should be taking those in. If the institutions are religious, they should try to solve some religious and spiritual things. So this is what institutions need to do, become inspiring by being relevant to all generations, beyond Punjabi and non-Punjabiness, beyond English and Punjabi stuff. So all the things we have from sexuality to race, going beyond them and being relevant to the current times.
Thank you. And specifically, while we move from the broader institutional impacts that maybe that we can bring along, what do you see SikhRI's role as part of that institutional change and evolution?
SikhRI is an educational organization. I, along with the staff and the leadership, as well as other stakeholders, which include Sangat members, our role remains how do we continuously work on presenting the Shabad, presenting the Tariq, which are basically the source again in Guru Granth Sahib, and the history from a Sikh narrative. Because at the end of the day, we are a bridge between academia and community. So our work is to look at the great work being done by all sorts of people, including academics, and figuring out how to present it in a Sikh form, in a digestible, in a palatable forms, in the vocabularies which are respectful. We are not going to be critical to Guru Granth Sahib, but we can be critical to those who interpret it. We are not going to be critical to the historicities of the Gurus. We are not going to be defensive about what the Gurus and the Sikhs of the Gurus did, but we must contextualize it. We must locate it. So that's the role SikhRI is trying to play with the global audience, is to present beyond complexes, the ideas of Gurbani, the paradigms of Sikhi, which are based out of Ikowankar, which created this one force, oneness paradigm, and present it to the world, and let the world do, let the individual do, let the organizations do what they want to do with it. So personally developing individuals and then creating critical thinking in the institutions.
Very well said. Thank you, Harinder Singh Ji. Now, as we move to your talk, give everyone a flavor for what gave you the inspiration for this talk, and how we can honor that talk in our lives. But first, give us the inspiration and we'll go from there.
So inspiration for the conference and subset of that for my talk is essentially, we want to present Guru Teghbahadar Padsha based on what he has written himself. So we have Bani available to us. Everyone knows Slok Mahalla Namas, but there are multiple Shabads and multiple rags in Guru Granth Sahib of Guru Tegh Bahadur. Secondly, then finding the contemporary and near contemporary sources to present historically what happened. Because there is age of appropriation did not start in the last 10 years. It has been going on since the Guru periods. From the Guru Nanak onwards, people want to present things in different perspectives. So our idea is, how can we look at the Sikh narratives, the Sikhs who studied this, and the Sikhs who lived it, Sikhs who served the Guru, how do they present these? And taking those two elements and presenting it to the larger world. So whether we talk about death, whether we talk about politics, whether we talk about contextualizing this in current Indian scenario, etc., we wanted to take all those things and bring it in the conference, and that's why we call it the Benevolent Guru. And the topic which I end up choosing, the title rather, for my talk, is actually based on one of the writings of the Guru's poet, where Painand Lal Goa is telling us what Guru Tegh Bahadur is in the line of global sort of what the world calls prophets or the gurus or the devtas or the thinkers or the leaders, whatever word you want to use. So that line which he has written in Ganjanama, and I'll talk more about it later, it's from there. So the Sultan, the sovereign of the world and hereafter, which means this world and the world beyond. And so that's where I pulled it out of, trying to present the grandeur of the Guru as well as historical elements of the Guru. So we are available from the first primary and the secondary sources, how to get into the realm of what Guru is, and who best can tell us that than the court words of the Guru himself.
After such an inspiring introduction, I can't wait to hear your talk, Harinder. Please, let's go.
Thank you. So as I said already, the talk I have given, the title I have made it is the sovereign of the world and hereafter. Now, what I'm going to be doing in this talk is present to you some selections from the writings of the two court poets. First one is by Nandlal Goya, and he has in Persian and Farsi a composition called Ganjanama. So I'll be sharing ideas from there to establish the grandeur of the Guru. And Painandlal Goya is a court poet of Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj, who actually served in the court of Shah Jahan, and Aurangzeb observed him because he was preparing to go serve in the court at Anandpur at Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj when he was leading the Darbar. So that's the individual who's writing this. So he comes from Ghazni, Afghanistan, serves in Agra, and ends up serving, preparing to serve at the court of Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj. The second person whose writings I'll be utilizing is called Sri Gur Soba. His name is commonly called Senapat, Chandrasen Senapat, and that's his writing. He writes in Braj, or sometimes called Bridge, which is a precursor to contemporary Hindustani, and where he is writing, when he's writing the history of Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj, I pulled out selections from there, how he introduces in historical sense what Guru Tegh Bahadur Pasha did. So the idea is, from Guru Nanak period, there was what we say, there is civilizational issues were going on from the Hindu as well as Islamic, so Semitic and Aryan. Well, that's another way to look at it. One is coming from the Indus Valley civilization, and another writer is coming from Ganges Valley civilization, and they come together to serve at the court at the Anandpur. So there is a route to Anandpur here, and that's where I want to focus on through these two contemporary writings. In the beginning, I must say that it is a task. I am just a student of SikhRI. I'm not an expert in any language. So looking at various versions, how people presented them, including the original text, I had to pick one of the texts to work with it, but I can share with you that there are 3 to 4 versions available of everything, but I'm trying to impress and share upon the ideas behind those. So the first idea I want to pick on is this idea of Sultanate. By Nandlal in Ganjanama, there are 2 portions when he talks about Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib. First one is in prose, and the title he writes of that prose is Sultanate Naam. Literally, if we translate that, that will mean the 9th Sultanate. So you can call sultanate to be whatever you want, kingdom, dominion, domain, whatever you want to call it, but it's the sovereignty idea again. And that's the title he gives. And when he goes to describe that, he ends up saying this ninth sultanate has what I will call today a new constitution. And it is the chief among chiefs of the truth exemplars. This idea of truth or haq is very big because he's coming from Islamic ideas. The word haq represents the idea of truth, the eternal truth. And he says, where I got this line from, that Sultanul Dunya wal Akhirat. He is the sovereign of the world and hereafter, and he is the beautifier of the throne of honor and greatness. Look at the words being used, which I'm employing in English to explain this. And look at the grandness of these words. He says, even though the Guru, referring to Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, even though he possesses great divine power, but he still bows his head to the divine will and command. This idea of a great personality like Guru Teghbahadar Sahib still operates in the command, the hukum, the raza of the divine. And he is the hidden instrument of the divine splendor and greatness, Jalal. The splendor is Jalal, the majestic ideas. And he's the examiner. This is very interesting here. He presents him as being, he's the examiner of the auspicious command followers. Those who follow the hukum, he tests them. And he's the reviver rather, of the impartial, principle-driven devotees. So people who are unbiased, people who want to follow a particular principle and they're devoted to it, he revives them. So he's working on the average person who wants to be connected to the divine, and he's testing those who are claiming to be the one following the hukum. He's the great followers of the divine path and the dwellers of the next world remain steadfast because of his nature, because of Guru Tegh nature, which is based on truth and is the companion of the elevated power. So it's very poetic, it's very majestic, it's very big. And then he ends this prose, the first part of the prose, by saying Taj. He utilizes the word Taj. He's the crown of the special chosen lovers, as well as the truth exemplar divine devotees. So this is interesting if you're getting that why this word chosen, because remember it's coming from Islamic ideas, the vocabulary is that, and they have this idea in Semitic traditions where prophets are chosen. So that's why vocabulary sounds like that. But what he's saying is he's the crown of two kinds of personalities in this world. The ones who are special chosen lovers, lovers of the divine in that sense, and also the crown of the truth exemplar divine devotees, those who are average people who are committed to divine and are devoted to the divine and who live that truth. That's the first part. The second part is about the name. So that's the second thing I want to get into from Ganjanama. What's in a name? I personally find this intriguing, and I'm always about what does the word mean? What are these letters meaning? So the second part of this prose under Sultanate Naam, the ninth sovereign, ninth sultanate, this is how he describes. And by the way, these are Persian letters, Farsi, which is Perso-Arabic. So when I'm explaining this, I'm explaining the English meaning, but in Farsi, those words and explanations started with that particular alphabet. So he says, his blessed name's Te, which is letter T, beautifies living in the divine command and will. His Persian Ye, and he writes that Farsi Ye. He says his Persian Ye, which is letter E, exemplifies great complete belief. His blessed Kaf. Now, those of you who know script, Persian Arabic speak, that the Kaf produces many letters, including Gaf, which is what is the letter G. And that's why the word Kaf is being said, because Gaf is born out of that as well. So he says his blessed Kaf or Gaf, letter G, exhibits his graciousness in humility from head to toe. Graciousness in humility from head to toe. And his name's Be, which is letter B, with He, which is letter H, ornate the council of knowledge and education. Actually, the word uses mahfil, and mahfil has to be contextualized. It could be entered for entertainment. It could be a court. Here I'm saying it's the council, the divine council. And that's what the B and the H stand for. It's the council, which it ornates the council of education and knowledge. And the eternal originated Aleph. Aleph in Islamic vocabulary is where the Allah started, and hence the idea of eternal. He says that letter Aleph, which represents A, the long A sound in Bahadur, decorates the faith and the truth. And his infinite wisdom, Dal, which is letter D, rules both worlds, but in a very just manner. And the last ray, which is the letter R, knows the hidden divine ways and forms the foundation of the highest truth. So this is how Painan Lal Goya incorporates the Farsi sort of alliterations using their letters and presents the grandeur of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib. And quickly, I want to get into the second part of Ganjnama. This is the poetic part. And the poetic part, the title he writes it, Vaheguru Jio Sat. So the word Vaheguru is employed. And it says very clearly, if you interpret that, it means revered Vaheguru, which is awesome wisdom, is eternal. And in explaining that, in those 5 shares which he put together, he actually starts with his name here, where he says, Gur Teghbahadar Sarapa Afzal. From head to toe, Guru Teghbahadar is act of kindness. And he beautifully radiates the divine counsel with splendor. So there comes the word mahfil again. Zinat aray mahfil jaho jalal. So from head to toe, Guru Teghbahadar is act of kindness. And he beautifully radiates the divine counsel with splendor. The light of truth is illuminated by his auspicious existence. But both the worlds are illuminated by his victorious grace. This idea of both the worlds classically means this world and the world beyond. In Sikh world, it is also interpreted to mean the Miri Piri, the political and the spiritual world as well. So the divine chose him from the chosen honorable ones, again from Islamic and Judeo-Christian heritage tradition, Semitic tradition. So the divine chose him. Why did he choose him? From who? From the chosen honorable ones. Why did he pick him? Because he, implying Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, experienced to surrender and submit to divine will the best. He's basically saying Guru Tegbahadar's experience of taslim o raza. And this phrase I struggled with initially when I was working on it. I even tweeted this. Some people suggested to me certain things. I got caught up in various interpretations where I looked at what Gyandi Mahasingh is saying, what Bhai Veer Singh is saying, Dr. Ganda Singh has written, among others. And then I eventually said, I'm going to use what the Islamic world understands this phrase, because the phrase is used most commonly in the Islamic world. In Islamic world, I'm putting this in quotation, taslim o raza means to surrender and submit to the divine will. So Guru Teghbahadar Pasha was chosen from the honorable ones by the divine because the experience of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib was the best in what? In surrendering and submitting to the divine will. His status was elated to the greatest among the great accepted ones, and through divine grace was hailed in both the worlds. All hands are holding onto his hem of grace. This idea of hem, palla, palle jinu, is very big. Dast, the original says daste hamga. So the hands are holding. This idea is that what do I hold down to in order to feel this grace? He says all people, all hands are holding to his hem of grace. And you see this coming alive in history. His voice of truth is beyond the light of knowledge. So ilm haq, so ilm is knowledges. He says all the knowledge is available, all the lights, all the enlightenments, all the knowledges we get, they are not as shiny. If you're looking for the next knowledge, then his voice of truth, what we would call today the Bani of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, that's what's the next thing. So this is where the 3 things I was trying to get out of Ganjnama was that, that he's presented as a sultanate, the sultan, the sovereign, and then beauty in the name of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib from Farsi alliterations, and this idea of taslim o raza, to surrender and submit to the divine will, but willfully doing it, as a lover doing it, not because somebody's forcing you to do it, as a choice, because I want to love the divine. The second thing, text, which I will share a few things out of, the idea was that in Senapat's writings, I wanted to share that how he's presenting the larger Sikh narrative. And this is where historical revisionisms need to be countered a little bit, because this is written by the court poet of the Guru as well, who is serving in Braj Pasha, he's writing, and he's serving the court of Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj. So how does he present what is Guru Tegh Bahadur historically? In the Indian context, in the Hind context, in the Dharam, which has multiple meanings, including religion, righteousness, I'm calling that principles. And then he also presents to us that gurus are all same. This is a running thesis in SikhRI, and he presents this as well, that do not differentiate between Guru Nanak and Guru Gobind Singh, in this case, including Guru Tegh Bahadur. And then how Guru Tegh Bahadur physically established institutions in Makhowal and developed the legacy, started the legacies which we see in Sahibzades as well. So in this selection, what I wanted to start with is that, again, there are varieties. There are variations of what has been written depending on Dr. Ganda Singh's text. And that's the one I am keeping as the basic text. And where he says, he starts with, Pragat Pahe Guru Tegh Bahadur, Sagal Srisht Pe Tapi Chadar. And this I want to spend time on. Guru Tegh Bahadur was revealed to the world, and whose domain covered the whole creation. And this is very important to understand. Sagal Srisht Pe Tapi Chadar. Tapi is to cover, to provide, to protection is the idea, to the whole creation, Srisht. And then he explains, what does this Srisht include? And he says, Karam Taram ki jin pat rakhi. So he includes the idea of Karam and Taram, which are very big in Indic traditions. And Braj language is utilizing this because people of the Ganges Valley are being brought in to understand what Guru is doing. And here he says, when the domain covers the whole of the creation, and which protects the honor of the karam, the act or the deed, as well as the taram, which is what I'm calling the principle. You can call it religion, righteousness, discipline, whatever you want to call. So it includes that. It is not limited to only the karams and taram, but it includes because it's about the larger creation. And he says, Atal Kari Kal Jug Mein Sakhi, who witnessed the narrative and whose witness narrative became eternal in this dark era, in this ignorant era. So the Guru's fame spread in the whole creation because he did this, which protected all principles. I want to focus on this again. He says, Jehte sarab taram bancheo. This is very important to understand. However you want to interpret the word taram, but it says sarab taram bancheo. All principles, whether they're of religious issues or political issues, all principles are protected by Guru Tegh Bahadur's life history. And he was victorious, and victorious in all three worlds. This is the Indic vocabulary of three worlds, where you say two worlds in Islam. In Hinduism, they talk about three worlds, Matlo, this world, the nether worlds, and the heavenly worlds. And this is how the Guru protected the honor. And then there's a case study mentioned. So there's a larger thesis of the Guru. He says, how did Guru do this? Did he just talk about it? As the European Enlightenments were talking about, they might defend somebody in dissent, but they weren't sure if they could. Well, Guru Tegh Bahadur actually did it. So it actually says then, how did he do it? He says the Hindu forehead mark, the tilak, sacred thread, the janeu, the religious centers, the taramsal, they exist eternally now due to the Guru's compassion. So this idea of Satgur Tilak Janeu Ar Taramsala. So he completely covers. He says, this is the case study. Guru did it. And Guru did this. And after doing all this, he left this world. But they exist. The reason they survived, the Kashmiri Pandits and Brahman, and eventually the idea of what is now called generally the Hindu idea, they exist eternally due to the Guru's compassion. In principle, the Guru departed for the divine abode. The next Guru became known as Guru Gobind Singh. So this is very, very important for us to understand that Hinddi Chadar is a subset of protector of humanity. Taramdi Chadar is a subset of protector of humanity. Guru protects regardless of their political affiliation, their sexual orientations, their ethnicities, their races, their genders, and everything within, because Sagal Srisht Pe Tapi Chadar. The other idea which I want to quickly present, that Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj, we understand this about, but Sri Guru Sopa also says that Guru Tegh Bahadur and Guru Gobind Singh became the emancipator and the emancipation. Let's think about this for a second. Look at how it's actually written. It's beautifully written. That Taran Taranam. So Glorious victory resounded in the three worlds. The Guru was revealed as the first, as the doer and the deed. The interesting wordplay is very important. Kirya and Karanang. So emancipator and emancipation, Taran and Taranang, and Kirya and Karanang, the doer and the deed. The destroyer of the wicked, the liberator of the truth exemplar, the emancipator of the whole world, and the eliminator of fear. Third time, Sanapat stresses this again. So there should be no doubt about who the Guru is protecting. He says Guru is protecting everyone. Sab Jagatarana Avaharana. Sab Jagatarana, the emancipator of the whole world and the eliminator of the fear. And because he did this, even the gods from the Hindu tradition, they proclaimed Jaya Jaya Jaya, victorious, victorious, victorious. And they all entered the sanctuary of the Guru, the collection of the Hindu gods and goddesses. This is a one way of presenting the Guru. The two other quick ideas I want to mention, which I shared in the beginning, that in Sri Gur Soba, he also makes it very clear that all Gurus are the same. And the simple translation, which I've been doing in these, it says, you alone are Guru Nanak, you alone are Guru Angad, you alone are Guru Amar Das, you alone are Guru Ram Das, you alone are Guru Arjan, you alone are Guru Har Gobind, you alone are Guru Har Rai, you alone are Har Krishan. So you might be wondering with the word alone, because there are others who were claiming to be the Gurus. And then when he comes to the ninth Guru, it's amazing the way he presented it. He says, you became the ninth sovereign. Your power protected the dark era. And then he plays with the words. It's amazing the way he's written. He says, Teghbahadar Jag Chadar Sab Tu Hi Hai. Again, he represents and re-emphasizes Tegh, sword alone is Bahadur, warrior, his name, sword warrior. You alone cover, which means protect the whole world. You alone are the 10th sovereign, Guru Gobind Singh. You alone came as the divine to liberate the world. So this continuity of the Gurus, which is a thesis of Guru Granth Sahib and SikhRI, is very well presented by this court poet as well. And finally, he references Makhowal, which is the name of a village where Guru Teghbahadar Pasha set up Makhowal. He bought the space, which we now call Anandpur Sahib. And the beautiful Makhowal is the dwelling place of the eternal Guru, he writes, where the extraordinary wonders of Myra divine place in multiple dimensions were seen. So, when we say there were Kathaks, people like to talk about miracles. He says the miracles which Guru Teghbahadar did, they are not the magic kind. They're of extraordinary kind, which means he's developing the new kinds of institutions and the new kinds of people, the new way to live, which they eventually, the Persian chronicles have called it Millat-e-Nau. The new nation was being born there. And he ends with the last reference to Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, that many years passed in this ways, which means he spent time in Makhowal, and then Guru Gobind Singh also spent time there. Then he left for Paonta, but then he says in one Dohra, and I want to share that because this is the legacy of the Guru, even within his family, as well as for the Sikhs, where he says, blessed, blessed are the sons of Gurudev. Gur is perfection, and Dev is divine, which is gods in Hindu tradition. He says, blessed, blessed are the sons of the perfect divine, referring to Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, who had no greed for their bodies. No greed for their bodies. Just think about that for a second. I mean, I don't even know how to present this at the highest levels, because what this is saying is when you have no attachment to your body, then you can become like Guru Teghbahadar. Then you can become like the Sahibzades. He's referring to the Sahibzades. And when he's referring to the Sahibzades, he says, Tan tan Gurudev sut, tan ko lobh na keen. They were not greedy for their bodies, which means they were not attached to their physical bodies. And he says they protected the principle, they protected this dharam in the dark era to receive fame from their grandfather, referring to the Sahibzades. So that's the beauty of the contemporary writings of Bhai Nandlal Goya as well as Chandrasen Senapat, who are both court poets of the Guru, who tell us about the grandeur of the Guru, who tell us about how to historically locate the Guru, to not get caught up in Punjabi politics only, Sikh politics only, Hindutva politics only. We must be able to contain everything. And Guru Teghbahadar then rises to this highest level of Sultan ul Dunya wal Akhirat, the sovereign of the world and hereafter. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you, Harinder Singh Ji. One of the things I was looking for in the presentation, which you brought out so eloquently, was contextualizing for us Sri Guru Granth Sahib, Guru Teghbahadar Ji's life with Gurbani and with real examples. And you brought all of that forward to us. So thank you very much for that very eloquent presentation. As we move forward, before we take you to the next speaker, we'll give you a moment to take a look and understand and appreciate the Guru's family lineage. Thank you, Harinder Singh Ji. That family tree, the universal presence of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib and the universal presence of Akal Purkh and the blessings thereof was really beautifully presented. Our next presenter will be from Gandhinagar in Gujarat. It'll be Dr. Ishmeet Kaur. Due to a family emergency, Dr. Ishmeet Kaur is not able to join us live today. However, we have a pre-recorded presentation, and she was kind enough to answer some questions. So before we get to her questions, I want to give you a little background on Dr. Ishmeet Kaur. She's a professor at the Central University of Gujarat and has been recognized as an inspired teacher for the President of India's in-residence program at Rashtrapati Bhavan. She works on areas related to literature of the margins, social movements, and studies of violence and trauma. Her most recent work has been on violence studies engaging with discourses on women and violence, as well as the 1984 anti-Sikh carnage in New Delhi. She is a poet, she's a walker, and not surprising about the walking, because as we know, many poets do like to walk, and especially in nature. So we welcome you to the next presentation by Dr. Ishmeet Kaur. Please.
Apologies for not being able to join live today. What last year has taught all of us is that no matter how much we plan, but maybe our plans may not come across. This also happens in Hukum, and I accept this in grace. Jasjeet ji, thank you for your questions, and I will try to answer them candidly. Your first question, that what did I encounter while preparing for this talk, is very significant for me too. What I learned while preparing for this talk is largely that in order to understand the ideology, teachings of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, we need to also realize that before him there have been 8 gurus. Adi Granth has been compiled. There have been a movement that has been going on for years together. So how do we understand what Guru Teghbahadar Sahib is offering to us? So in order to understand that, we have to return to the historical texts, authentic historical texts, and also those who were written during the Guru period and very close to the Guru period. For this, I delved into reading by Santokh Singh, Kavi Senapati, also Ratan Singh Bangu, by Nandlal, and so on and so forth, many of them. And slowly and gradually, we'll be reading into them. So that was something very important that I encountered, and that took me back to realizing, even from the personality of how Guru Sahib looked, how he behaved, what were the circumstances around him, who were the people who were around him. And I could think about all of them, and I could actually visualize many of those things, and which actually opened up a great understanding about the Guru himself. The second question that you have asked is that what could be a takeaway for the audience? This is extremely important because I think it's very important to imbibe the teachings of Guru Sahib in our own lives. And what is more important to think is of the way or the methodology to do that. How do we do that? And that is where I feel that, we must understand that Guru Sahib now is giving us a very, very firm ground. He is in fact liberating us from any kind of fear of weaknesses in life, fear of vulnerabilities, fear of even death. So there is complete liberation that Guru Sahib is talking about. But in order to be liberated, we can do that practically in our lives only and only if we follow the Guru's teachings. And in order to follow the Guru's teaching, we need to realize them. In order to realize them, we need to read them in contexts. I suggest what's important is to look at the significance of the ideology, significance of his martyrdom, significance of many life lessons that we get from, his own life, and also to be able to internalize those lessons which we learn from him.
Thank you, Dr. Shmit Kaurji. We here at SikhRI wish you and the family the best. In spite of all that you are going through, Dr. Shmit Kaur graciously recorded her presentation, which we have just played for everyone. Thank you, Dr. Shmit Kaur, and we wish you the best for your future. Thank you. Okay. We will, as questions come up in the Q&A, we'll be answering them for everyone. So please keep your questions coming, and we'll move forward in the presentations today. At this time, just give me a second here, please. We have our question and answer session at this time, I believe, is where we're at, and we'll. I think I may have lost time course here. Everybody, give me a second, please. The Dr. Ishmeet Kaur's full presentation will be given next, and welcome everyone to join it, please.
To understand the significance of ideology and martyrdom of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, we need to realize that there was a wider cause in establishing a new set of dimensions pertaining human rights, justice, and freedom. His martyrdom needs to be read on basis of two aspects. One, the wider and the overall significance of standing for truth and raising a voice for the welfare of others beyond the limited sense of an individuated self. Second, by studying the particularity of laying his life for the protection of the Hindu community that was facing forced conversion, killings, and atrocities at the hands of the Mughals. The focus has to be laid on the wider significance of the reason for martyrdom in the particularity of fighting for the case of Hindus against the Mughals. We must realize that it was not a fight of one community against the other, but it was a battle of right against wrong, of truth against falsehood, and of righteousness against discontent. Hypothetically, even if the case was vice versa, the Guru would have stood for truth irrespective of the community. We also need to know that there were larger tyrannical forces around that time which were quite oppressive in nature. The Mughal rulers had very less regard for human dignity, for human rights, and the principle of justice. There was great instability in the agrarian situation. There was a lot of exploitation of the helpless and the poor farmers, of the poor peasants. The zamindars gave in to the pressures of the jagirdars. The jagirdars faced a lot of insecurity because they were transferred from one place to the other, and therefore they became very corrupt and they gave in to exploitation. But it was not a problem of the Hindus alone. An ordinary Muslim also faced similar problems. So the poor Muslim, who was also dependent on peasantry, faced a lot of similar problems. This is evident from the fact that a prominent Muslim fakir, Adam Hafiz, had also joined the Guru, particularly Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, in the Sikh movement, as the Sikh movement stood against all forms of tyranny. For Guru Tegh Bahadur, spirituality was supreme and he was free from any ideological bearings of any sect. He believed in assertion of truth, teachings of Guru Nanak, and other gurus before him. Guru Tegh Bahadur's philosophy can be understood through his Bani, particularly from his sloks. 4 of his sloks shaped new dimensions which were different from all philosophies available until now. Dr. Taran Singh talks about the significance of those 4 sloks which are recorded in Guru Granth Sahib under Slok Mahla Nawa, slok number 16, 51, 53 and 57. Dr. Taran Singh says that these sloks were uttered at a particular moment in time, at a moment when the right time had come for the need of these sloks to be uttered. This historical moment had come after years of experience. Dr. Taran Singh says that these sloks would change the Indian history. These sloks gave birth to Khalsa Panth. They gave birth to declaration Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. They are immersed in foundation of SikhRI, and the right time had come when Guru Teghbahadar Sahib revealed these sloks. The first slok that we take in the study today was Bhai Kahu Ko Det Neh, Ne Bhai Manat An, Kahu Nanak Sun Re Mana, Gyani Tahi Pakhan. In this slok, Guru Sahib focuses on wisdom and the endower of wisdom, the enlightened one. The enlightened one is the one who gains consciousness of righteousness and of the truth. And in understanding, in realizing the truth, this enlightened one is liberated from any kind of insecurity, from any kind of threat or fear. This person does not only believe in getting self-liberated, but believes in liberation of others along with self-liberation. Therefore, the principle, fear not, frighten not, becomes central. So the enlightened one realizes the truth and is not in threat of anything, neither can anything threaten this person, nor does this person believe in threatening anyone else. In slok number 51, Guru Sahib says, Chinta taki kijiye, jo anhoni hoye, eh marag sansar ko, Nanak thir nahi koye. In this slok, Guru Sahib is actually, in a way, predicting his own martyrdom. Guru Sahib is preparing his followers and the Sikhs for what was to come. Guru Sahib says that one should worry about something that is inevitable, because death is inevitable and nobody is permanent. Therefore, a Sikh should not be in anxiety or fear of death. In this slok, Guru Sahib is also embedding a message that a Sikh is supposed to live one's life serving others, and at the same time, if need be, one should not shy away from dying for the cause of others. In Slok Malla Nova number 53, Guru Sahib says, Bal chutgyo bandan pare, kachu na hot upaye, kaho nanak ab ot har gaj, jiyo hoy sahay. In this slok, Guru Sahib is talking about spiritual strength and about material bondages. In case the spiritual strength is lost, one binds to material allurements, and it is at that time when no efforts fructify. The slok changes into supplication, into a prayer, where Guru Sahib prays that in such a time, Ikyomkar should come to help in the same way as Ikyomkar helped the elephant who was stuck in the clutches of an octopus or the crocodile, according to a folkloric story. Here, Guru Sahib is also, in a way, also testing the child Gobind Rai's spiritual strength. Some historians feel that it was sent as a message to Gobind Rai, and Guru Teghbahadar Ji wanted to check on the spiritual strength of Guru Sahib. Therefore, the form of this slok is that of a letter, epistolatory. The next slok, slok number 54, is an explanation. Similar kind of vocabulary has been used in slok number 54, which is an extension of slok number 53. And there Guru Sahib says, Bal hua bandhan chute, sab kich hot upaye, Nanak sab kich tumre haath mein, tumhi hot sahay. There are 4 keywords used in this slok: Bal, bandhan, upay, and oath. Bal meaning spiritual strength, bandhan bondage, upay effort, and oath sanctuary and support. Guru Sahib here explains that once the spiritual strength is gained, then all bondages to material allurements are removed. And it is when all efforts are fructified and Ikyomkar comes to the support, to the aid of the follower, to the aid of the Sikh. These 4 Shabads are principles of a revolution that becomes instrumental in the making of the Panth. Truth, righteousness, and justice are 3 epitomes on which a Sikh is supposed to spend one's own life. Guru Sahib extends a message of universal brotherhood, individual freedom to practice one's own faith that one chooses with dignity. This concept is available to us in the Western discourse as well. The notions of liberty, equality, fraternity that originated in the political discourse with popular movements in the Western world, primarily with Locke and in the late 18th century with Rousseau, were much later on, and the Guru had already initiated this discourse with the action-oriented practical approach much before this came in the Western world. And therefore, we need to say that the Guru was already in occlusion with the rulers of, or with those who remained indifferent to the exploitation and oppression of the common people who felt despondent and helpless. Dr. Keher Singh offers a great explanation of this in his work. In order to justify this, we resort to early Sikh historians to understand the contribution and the spirit of Guru's philosophy and the essence of his martyrdom. We return to Senapati, a eminent Sikh historian and a poet, who in Sri Guru Sobha explains uh, that Guru Sahib was a shelter to the entire creation. In fact, it's very interesting to see that he uses the word Shrishti. It may not be wrong to say that the phrase Shrishti ki chadar was perhaps coined from Senapati's explanation. Senapati calls Guru Sahib as Sagal Shrisht pe Jaki Chadar. He uses this phrase, and the importance is that he's using the word creation, which is even extending beyond human beings, or which is an extension, or which is moving beyond the term Jagat, or even Hind, or even Dharam. And in fact, if we see, there is an inclusion of the entire cosmos, of fauna, of flora, of everybody. And therefore, the Guru extends his approach for the rights of the entire cosmos. And in explaining this, Senapati says that uh, Guru Teghbahadar sheltered the whole creation with his grace, and he upheld the right to religious freedom and deeds, which immortalized his saga in the age of Kali Yuga. Senapati uses the terms dharam karam, he uses the word sarab dharam, even when he is referring to Guru Sahib as a protector of Tilak Jinnu, he uses it, he supplements it, or he adds Dharamshala with it. So we need to realize that even in the cause of individual community, the idea of Dharam is never lost. Guru Sahib is working on an all-inclusive approach. Um, One question that comes to our mind over here and which needs to be asked is that why did Kashmiri Pandits choose to approach Guru Tegh Bahadur? There were other warriors at that time as well. But what was the reason that brought the Kashmiri Pandits to Guru Tegh Bahadur? The answer to this question is sought in Ratan Singh Bangu's text, Sri Guru Pant Prakash. Ratan Singh Bangu, in fact, explains that Guru Tegh Bahadur was known to be the bravest of the brave, and his fame had spread far and wide in the whole world. And whoever was oppressed or whoever felt tortured and aggrieved sought shelter and protection of Guru Tegh Bahadur. And once that person approached Guru Tegh Bahadur, that person felt relieved. So that was how Guru Sahib was popular. And that is the faith and trust of people around him that brought the Kashmiri Pandits to Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib. At the same time, in Sri Guru Pant Prakash itself, he talks about Guru Tegh Bahadur, who gave up his life for the protection of others' human rights. He made the supreme sacrifice in this dark age in Kali Yuga and protected the religious rights and rituals of Hindus. He uses the words dharam karam, and that is what is important, that even in the cause of Hindus, he was standing by what was right. Even Pai Santokh Singh in Sri Guru Pratap Suraj Granth, while praising Guru Sahib for coming on the earth for the purpose of righteousness, in a way through his poetic imagination, which is very close to historical reality, is declaring the purpose of martyrdom. Shrishti ki chadar, for that matter, is a term which is all inclusive and is an umbrella term. Some scholars chose to call Guru Sahib as Dharam ki chadar or Hind ki chadar. But Shrishti ki chadar, in fact, does justice to the entire contribution of Guru Sahib. The idea of Hind, the concept of nation as we see today, was not the same in the period of Gurus. Nation conceptually is an 18th century construct in the Western discourse. The significance of Guru's martyrdom gave a discourse of universal brotherhood with emphasis on human rights and dignity for all individuals, irrespective of community, religion, caste, creed, gender. And it brought with it freedom to live with liberty in the shared world created by Ikyomkar. And Jasjeet ji, with this, I come to an end of my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Shmit Kaurji. What a wonderful presentation. And it just builds in eloquence to what Harvinder Singh had presented earlier. So Harvinder, we're back. Welcome back. We have many questions from the chat, and we can move forward. I have some own questions of my own as well for you. So I don't know where you want to get started, but maybe we can begin with one of the things that was presented. I think it's a dichotomy we all face when reading Guru Granth Sahib and our own living our lives. The question first came up is what and how do we understand divine will and the idea of free will and how to do that in the context of a hukum. So please try and answer that question.
Sure. Well, we are missing Dr. Ishmeet Kaur. It would have been nice because it was a combined panel, but I will attempt to answer this from the life of Guru Teghbahadar Pasha and his own Bani, because our focus is on him today. We are celebrating the illumination he brought. So it is less really about other things, if you ask me. So within the context of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, he's writing this. He's saying that if you even just study his Slok Mahalla Nawaz, he continuously writes, what does it mean to be free? He has sloks on that. What does it mean to be enlightened? And he's targeting those questions to the mind because these are mind questions, right? At the end of the day, when you live certain things, you have transcended that. He's also asking questions regarding the various aspects of life, what the mind thinks about our childhood or youth, what a mind thinks about people with high net worths and large families. So when he's going through that journey, he's saying, I have observed all this. I am witnessing all this. At the end of the day, what makes sense to me is that there is this idea of Ikovankar, lovingly sometimes called Bhagwan, Bhagwan, and he invokes this, is the adorable one, is the fortunate one where we feel this connection to. And he says, the divine will is when I am able to see the larger connection with everything in the world. When I am not able to see it, I am seeing connections to things, people, relationships. So living in divine will is not a harsh or a hardened or sort of a dominating thing in Sikh tradition at all. It is actually when I am coming in connection with, in sync with the larger sort of natural laws, what I like to call the force, the Ikovankar ideas. So our will is not in contradiction to it. We have our own conflictions when we deal with those, when we bring them in line with the larger phenomena around us, what in Sikh is called the culture of Naam, and Guru Teghbahadar Pasha invokes that. He says, what really matters is if you want to come in divine will, and he explicitly answered this as one salok, he says, what remains in this world? So if you figure out what remains, you have come in the divine will. He says, Naam raheo, sadhu raheo gur gobind. He says the Naam, this idea of Sikh culture, what we call is of Naam. The identity, the existence of the divine remains. Existence of the one remains. Sadhu rayo. Sadhu means sadhana, the one who is disciplined. In Sikh tradition, the discipline of Naam. The one who practices the discipline of Naam remains. Rahayo Gur Gobind, the wisdom which is like the divine, also remains. So if we want to remain is the next line, practice this. So divine will is coming in connection with, coming in sync with the larger ideas around us, what we now call culture of Naam. And that's what Guru Teghbahadar Pacha is presenting as well within his life. He did not fight, for example, he's fighting the issues, but he is very aware of what is happening in South Asia at the time, in Amritsar at the time, within his family at the time. He's looking at what is happening in Bihar, Assam, and Kashmir at the time, as well as all its consolidation at the power of Delhi. But he continues with this because he believes he's connected to now.
Thank you for that in-depth explanation, Harinder Singh. One of the things that sort of actually brings it right into the next question that comes up, and that is, as we move into that thought process, that culture of Naam, and Guru Sahib's principles that are brought forth in today's world, where humanity's headed, how do we bring that culture of Naam into the essence of our lives and in the essence of humanity today?
Sure. It's a bit repetitive, but I'll get more specific here. Well, we do it by becoming Naam-centered ourselves. So what that means is, again, in the journey of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, let's look at it. You know, think about this for a second. This is just for explanation, because certain things we can't understand, but the mind needs to understand, and it wants certain answers. You know, he was past Guruship. He was bypassed. Imagine how we feel when we are bypassed, whether at work, whether in our relationships. He fought, his original name is Tyagmal, you know, and he fought battles, the first battles in Sikh history with his father, Guru Har Gobind Sahib, right? So he is looking at life. He is looking at life. He is being given particular trainings and he is bringing them into his life. So when we are learning about Gurbani, the life of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, when we read the sloks or his Bani, when we study the history and the sources of knowledges of illumination from his life, part of those need to start affecting us. It's a journey. And we have a big journey in front of us. He literally was the second most traveled guru as well. And look at his journey from Amritsar to all over South Asia, more on the Ganges Valley civilization, and then back to Anandpur Sahib and Amritsar, and back and forth from Bihar as well. So in our journeys, we have to confront realities and work at our level, we will call it habit changes, but also working on the next agenda for myself and the organizations and institutions and networks we are part of.
Great, thank you very much. I did want to when you mentioned journey, I did want to go into another topic from journey, but somebody else's questions here, it's very important for us to answer. In the Ganjnama reference that you gave, there's an description, the opening 11 couplets are an invocation to the Guru, who raises men to the level of gods, to whom all gods and goddesses are slaves, and without whom there is only darkness in the world. In the Risala Dar Aval, Nanak Shah Darvish, its account of its martyrdom shares, the emperor called Guru Teghbahadar to the Deccan. The Guru insisted that he's a mere devotee of the God. He also explained that neither his name, Teghbahadar, nor the epithet Sacha Padsha are used for him to apply his temporal aspiration, and the Guru cannot work a miracle. The emperor at the time orders execution. Given these two quotes, how does one reconcile a difference between raising men to the level of gods and yet not accepting the immense power and responsibility bestowed upon him during this temporal time? Was it simply Guru Teghbahadar's humility, or were there qualities of his character in play?
So that's a great question. And I tried to take us through that journey when I was presenting the Ganjanama's two portions. So one is what Guru Teghbahadar Pasha himself writes. Second is what the two court poets wrote. And neither of them claimed any of that. So this third reference is coming from others. You know, we say things, you know, we say certain things because we feel like that. You know, I remember when first time I went to Pakistan in '84, I walked into Nankana Sahib. These Muslim brothers were singing a song saying, "Dharti te Rabb aa gaya, oh Rabb aa gaya, jehda sab de dilan diyan jaane." Well, now technically and theologically, there is a tension there. But what is being said is that lovingly certain things get said because they feel this is the Rabb for us. So my point is the Guru himself, the Sikh writings from the two court poets I mentioned, as well as in Guru Granth Sahib, do not say that gurus are God. In fact, the writings which I quoted today were saying that in the councils or the honorable ones or the chosen ones which were available to the divine, Guru Tegh Bahadur was selected to go do this on this earth. So I don't see a tension from a theological angle, but yes, in some historical texts that reality does exist. Sikhs, that's why I need to focus primarily our sources of knowledges need to come from more Sikh writings and more of Guru Granth Sahib writings.
Thanks for providing the additional detail. As I think in the historical context, as you well know, Sacha Pasha was used, or Pacha plus other terms were used to describe the Mughal rulers at that time in their own historical terminologies. But as you mentioned, Guru Granth Sahib, that's another question that came up. The word Shabad, and what really is Shabad, and similarly Naam, and how are they linked?
This little bit of outside of the scope today, but I would invite the individual who has asked this and to all audience to look at our project called Guru Granth Sahib. It's app.gurugranthsahib.io. We actually get into the details of this because there are many contexts of these words. But in generic sense, the simple answer is this. Shabad has many meanings, but at the highest level, the meaning is the wisdom, which we are calling the infinite wisdom, which is really for the mind when we are trying to learn the knowledges. And Naam is the existence of the Ekoankar, which really is for the heart for us to live. So they come together in the Sikh world. And somebody had written this, and I also feel this, and I actually presented, I said, you can look at as being the two contemporaries who were writing 100 years ago, and even now. So I actually said Harinder Singh Mehboob is really the writer who explores the Shabad. And when I read Bhai Veer Singh and Professor Puran Singh, they explore Naam. And that's the thing. Certain things feed certain faculties of mind. Something feeds mind as well as beyond mind. But I invite all of you to look at that, where we explore these two words in various contexts within Guru Granth Sahib.
Thank you, Harinder Singh. One of the questions that popped up was the geopolitical impact of Guru Tegh Bahadur's martyrdom. Did Guru Aurangzeb stop the forced conversion of Hindus? And the second part is, did he not see the 10th Guru as a big threat because he let him flourish for some time?
We have other speakers who will be covering the politics of the Guru as well. So in the context of the two things where I was referring to what the Guru did, the second text of Senapath, it very much is showing that this is a political issue. This is why, when Guru Tegh Bahadur Pasha is introduced, he's actually introduced as being someone who's working on, who's a emancipator and emancipation, who is the deed and the doer. And when it says he is great with the sword, but he's great with the sword for the whole world. Absolutely. There is this thesis of states being threatened, the empires being threatened are always there. That was perceived in the case of Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib as well. So the whole Sikh thesis is that we have had tough relationships with every state, and we will continue to, because we are not aligned permanently with any political or spiritual power. We are permanently only aligned, according to Guru Granth Sahib, and we see this in the lives of the Gurus, only with Ekoankar. Hamra tada, tada is a Punjabi word, it comes in Gurbani. Hum harsang kiya. Our only permanent alliance is with Ekoankar. Every other alliance is based on the issue, based on the project, based on the struggles. And this is why you will see, even in the case of Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib, even when one Rajput king wants a particular mediation with the king of Assam, who actually reported to Aurangzeb, he has no problem doing that. In fact, he does it. He mediates them because he's not going to hold something against someone because in a particular space in Rajasthan, he was aligned with Aurangzeb. So gurus went into that nuancing. Gurus did not see, and he writes, Guru Tegh Bahadur, friends and enemies are alike. Well, they are alike, and this is how they are alike, because you do not hold any biases. And this is one of the things I cited today, that Guru Tegh Bahadur is reviving the unbiased, the impartial ones who want to be the devotees of the one. And that's one of the strengths of the Guru.
Impartiality.
That's-
That's really an important lesson for all of us today who can have our own biases. A question that came up, this is again another dichotomy in SikhRI and in life. What's your view or perspective on the fact that Guru Teghbahadar Ji abides by the concept of a householder, but at the same time in his Bani, many times he advises detachment from one spouse and children. So please provide that context for us for a better understanding.
Sure. So another one of the presentations today will be touching upon themes from Slok Mahla Nama. And I hope you will get insights from there. But it's not a dichotomy in SikhRI. I appreciate the question, but I want to make it a little bit more clear. SikhRI does not have dichotomies. I do. We may. So in that, it actually deals with it very well. It talks about attachments. It talks about how to deal with our various attachments, not just in relationships, but our own prides. Eventually, it's about the pride. And in the two references I did, in one of them, it actually covers that. In fact, today's hukum, when I woke up, again, Gurbani comes to us from various individuals, contributor gurus and Bhagats and Sikhs. Today's is not by Guru Tegh Bahadur, but it answers this. He says, if you're looking to get rid of Sahasa and Dukh, Sahasa is these sort of fears or doubts, and Dukhs, which are the pains, and the Ukhs, which are the hungers, you'll have to do something else. The problem we are caught up in, as I understand it, which is a global population, that we eventually don't know what matters most. It doesn't mean other things don't matter. And when you only work on what matters most for you, then that's what you get. If what matters most to you is a particular spousal relationship, or a particular job, a particular house, or a particular political position, then that's what matters most to you. What Guru is saying is, what matters most to me and to the Sikhs needs to be is a Kovankar. And everything else then comes in line with that. And even if they don't, this is the cost of it, which happened in the Guru period. Many of their siblings did not get along. They, in fact, conspired to get them killed. Guru Tegh Bahadur Pasha, the hitman was hired to assassinate him. So the clarity needs to be in is what matters most to me, which alliance matters most to me, which relationship matters most to me, which institution building matters most to me.
Thanks for the clarification. Obviously, when I mentioned the dichotomy, in the world, we live in a world of paradox. We have that within ourselves. When you have your title of your presentation, Singh, was Benevolent Warrior, what do we struggle with as humans every day? Malevolence. Benevolence and malevolence are something within us and in our world outside of us that we struggle with every day. And Guru Tegh Bahadur, to me, gives us the opportunity and the pathway on how to move towards benevolence and away from malevolence. And one of the ways he did that is through humility. What I want to ask from you is lessons from Guru Tegh Bahadur's life and contextualizing that with Guru Granth Sahib on the lesson for humility. That was his first name as well. So we can bring that essence of humility to a better consciousness for ourselves.
Excellent cue. So in one of the citations I did, he was actually presented twice as being somebody who from head to toe is gracious in humility. So this ability to be a great warrior, this ability to be a tyagmal, a renunciator, not of the world's paradigm, renunciator of what we in Sikh tradition call things which distract us from the divine. The one who was able to set up a parallel center to Sri Harmandir Sahib complex at Anandpur, the one who's able to set up the first diaspora center at Patna. Look at the accomplishments. And the humility is, this is all yours. And this is that slavery, quote unquote, sentiment which was cited earlier as well. This is the willful, I am yours. It's like slavery sometimes gets caught up into this, if you only have a Western confined lens to it, or a political lens. It's when actually individual says, I am yours. I adore you. Main kurban janna. This is what Guru Sahib is writing. So the humility comes in when the sense of accomplishment occurs at a human level. At the Guru's level, I just highlighted few and you will hear more from other presenters. When at my level, when there's a sense of accomplishment, is it really me who did it? The vocabulary matters, the intent matters, and how you share that sentiment with your groups and subgroups and the people of the world, everything matters. So it is not, and this has been in the Sikhs. You see this coming in the larger Sikh community. You see this coming when everyday Sikh, in the name of the Guru, is at the farmers' protest, which has now become farmers' movement, in whichever capacity, as a writer or as a langar provider or trying to do mediations. So I think that sense is in the Sikh psyche. These two writers who I try to bring in more is to bring those more clarities, that if we are getting distracted by too many pieces of information which might not be as clear about who the Guru is, let's become more clear. And part of becoming more clear is that regardless of our accomplishment, can we from head to toe, sarapa, that was the phrase, from head to toe, become an embodiment of humility. And that is a sign of being gracious as well, which was articulated by Pai Nandlal Goya.
Very good. Thank you for that answer. And as you mentioned during your answer, one of the words you used was distraction. And an individual who didn't have distraction was Makran Shah. And he also gave us the journey to the Guru. I want you to provide us a context of that journey and away from distraction to reaching the Guru.
Great. Here is one way to look at it. Makhan Shah Lobana was distracted earlier as well when he didn't know who the Guru was, but he knew that he needed the Guru's help, Guru's protection. I'm going to come back to the Srishti each other. The Guru is protecting everyone, but do I have the relationship to even acknowledge or realize who the Guru is? But once that clarity came, he's the one who declared to the world, no, there are many pretenders. I have discovered the Guru. So the desire is like us who are distracted. We do have a desire. Every day, Sikh, non-Sikhs, Punjabis, non-Punjabis, sometimes we reduce this. People have the desire to be with the wisdom with capital W. In this case, embodied through Guru Teghbahadar Sahib. And we want that, but we are distracted. And sometimes we get clarities in those distractions. And when we do have the clarity, we must seize that. We must not remain distracted. We must become focused. We must proclaim what the Guru did. And when the time comes, when the Delhi was so unkind to the Sikhs, including to Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, even then there was enough clarity that everything can be given in the name of the Guru, as did, one picked up the head of the Guru, because the head always belongs to the Guru. State cannot take it. Head has your thought, and head has this submission to the one. So one Sikh had the clarity, and we will today call the guts, the love, no fear, enthusiasm, all these things which we've been talking about, that he picked up the head of the Guru and took it to Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj in Anandpur Sahib. And another one said, my house is totally worth to be used to do the last rites of the Guru, which state is not allowing. That's the clarity. We all want this clarity. I deeply believe this. Everyone wants it, regardless of our labels and how we look, we do. And when that comes, there comes a moment when there is no calculation. That's where the love toward the Guru comes in. And we see this in the life of the Guru Teghbahadar and certain Sikhs.
Thank you for the enlightening answer, Harinder. Everyone in the chat has also appreciated it. I do want to bring you back to something you mentioned during this answer, and that's also come up several times already in both presentations as well as in the chat room, and that is Dharam di Chadar, Hindi Chadar, and Srishti di Chadar, and the protector of all, and provide us the context to better understand that protector of all, both from the Guru Teghbahadar's level and Guru Granth Sahib's level.
Sure. One of the larger Sikh theses is that the Gurus are Jagat Gurus. They're world perfection, divine wisdoms. And we see this in the life of Guru Teghbahadar as well. So the original sources, when it came down to what happened in 1765, because it's a historical thing, I'm going to put it in that context. What happened and what is the narrative of what happened in 1765 in what we now call the spot where the Gurudwara Sikh Sahib is. So the original court poets are writing that Guru is protecting the humanity, Guru is protecting the creation. And within that creation, Guru is protecting the individuals who even practice a particular karam or particular taram. And then he goes back to re-emphasize Sanapat it is, because he's using the vocabularies of what I was calling the Gangeswari civilization, the Braj, what is today's Hindustani's predecessor. 200 years ago, everyone wrote like this. And when Sanapat is writing, he says, Guru is protecting that as well. So the narrative gets changed or is not as clear when people like me write, we have a limitation. I have not seen the Guru. I have not visualized the Guru. I read a couple of books. I have no relationship with the Shabad or not enough of a relationship. Then I will end up using some other vocabulary, even in my good interest or good intention, something which reduces the grandeur of the Guru or the legacy of the Guru. So I look at it as being the original sources are providing, the contemporary one, that Guru is the protector that covers the humanity. And then later day, 100 years later, 200 years later, they become more Taram and Hind. So Taram is important. Yes, Guru is protecting Taram, original source mentions it. But what is Taram? It is not just religion or just the religion of the Hindus. It is anything and everything which a particular ideology or its followers and adherents are practicing. So it's the principle Guru is protecting. And Guru is protecting that with everything as well. And in protecting that idea of Taram, even if you take it in a very common sense of its religion, are you telling me that Guru Teghbahadar is not going to protect people who don't believe in idea of religion, or atheists or agnostics or Gnostics? No, of course not. That's what this is saying. And then the Hind each other, there's a geopolitical reality of it. The Hind word gets used in multiple contexts. It is not used in any of these writings. It comes in much later, maybe 200 years later. But we understand that it means protector of Hind. Al-Hind word in Persian writing is used for South Asia as well, subcontinent of India. Hind in political Hindutva, Hinduism is now reduced to Hindutva or the Hindu nation idea. It is not talking about that. It is talking about that while protecting humanity, different principles which people practice, including the religion of the Hindus, Guru did protect them as well against the atrocities or forceful conversions of Brahmins or Pandits from Kashmir. So that's the larger sort of a way to look at it. At the end of the day, I will actually repeat that line, and let me just find that very quickly, if I may, because those lines are very, very important. When Guru Teghbahadar Padsha is introduced, when Nami Padshahi, in that thesis, it says, Tegh ki Bahadar Jag Chadar Sab Tu Hi Hai. So even after explaining the idea of Srisht, Karam, and Taram, and in a different context, when all Gurus are being presented, when Guru Teghbahadar Padsha is introduced, he says, Jag Chadar Sab Tu Hi Hai. Again, to emphasize, it's for the world. It is not just for Hind. It is not just for Taram. It is for the world. It's for the creation. And that is the Sikh thesis. Wherever we live, wherever Sikhs have gone, I mean, even in America, we are fighting the battles 100 years ago and we continue to. Hopefully, we get more inspired from the life of the Gurus, how to deal with institutions and states and different alliances. What happened in Georgia today? What is happening in Delhi? We must know how to confront these reality. So Guru is not reducing it to particular ethnicity or religion or groups of people. He's creating a new millat, the new nation, which has a new constitution. And this is the new constitution, which is the Guru Granth Sahib. And that new constitution is our charter. It is not just scripture. And that charter starts with Eko Onkar. There is only one creative and pervasive force. And we are going to be those Jedi warriors who are going to feel the force and amplify this force.
As a benevolent warrior, And as some of the Guru Granth Sahib references you've given today, one of the questions is to put that in context during the life of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, and especially during his imprisonment and martyrdom, the issue of miracles. And it's also beyond Guru Teghbahadar Ji, comes up in Sikhi in many ways. Help us understand Guru Granth Sahib, miracles, and what happened in Guru Teghbahadar's life, please.
Sure. This miracle idea, I'm glad you mentioned this because, we get caught up in fascination. What is miracle? It's fascination. In one of the lines which I cited from Sri Guru Sobha, actual line is that one guru is in Makhowal. What is he doing there when he's staying there? He says, Leela anek bid. Leela is place, the divine place. Anek bid, of various kinds with various methodologies. Kautak karat bihan. The word is kautak. This is a Sikh vocabulary. Kautak is not magic. Kautak is something which we are not able to explain how it happened. It is just, it's against all odds. And this is a very important word for us to understand in secondary Sikh texts. And even in the primary, when Guru Granth Sahib, the word karamat is used, it was used to describe Guru Ramdas, that the karamat became that somebody who was orphaned, somebody who had nobody with him and no training, ended up becoming the uncontested leader of the Sikh nation, who we call Samrat Guru Ramdas, which is Guru Ramdas Sahib, right? So the word in Guru Teghbahadar Sahib's context is also that he is not here to do magical displays. The magic of the Guru is that the Guru himself did extraordinary things and developed the next people who I like to say people like me who are Padawans but not yet Jedis, who's developing the next ones to do extraordinary things, to do the next things, to find the solution which the world is waiting for in a particular reality. That is the Kautak. And Guru's Kautaks are amazing. The Godmen and their miracles is not part of any of the Gurus. Sometimes we struggle to explain those. It is okay to use metaphors, and it is okay even if some believe there were those things. But what there is no disagreement on is that Guru did extraordinary things, which we just have no words to explain and no logics to explain.
Thanks for the clarifying and enlightening answer, Hinder. The Kata, Kala, those are things we will always be experiencing when we feel the Guru. And we want that. And that's a challenge for us because as humans, we are always in that dichotomous stage of malevolence without benevolence, and that benevolence. So that really is a challenge for us as humanity. Thank you for the clarifying answers. I wish Dr. Ishmeet Kaur was here as well. We miss her. We wish her the best. But your answers really helped clarify many things for the audience as I'm seeing it in the chat room. So it's been a great discussion. We'll have further discussions later this afternoon. I think everyone, we are well on the way to understanding the benevolence of Guru Teghbahadar Ji, the benevolence of Guru Granth Sahib, and the enlightening experience that can bring to us and our lives, and the essence of our both personal and community and world affairs. Thank you, Harinder. Thank you, everybody. We will take a 5-minute break at this time. So everyone will be back in 5 minutes. Everyone can stretch your legs, have a cup of tea or coffee, and then we'll be back shortly. Thank you.
Mehrbani.
These hukamname are attributed to Guru Teghbahadar Sahib around 1670. The style of writing is known as Nastalik Calligraphy, using the Gurmukhi alphabet. The letters are stylized and the vowel sounds are modified. These hukamname identify some of the early Sikh followers of the Guru: Bhai Dayal Das, who was martyred before the Guru, Bhai Sibhu, Seth Kalyanmal, and others. They are written to the Sangat, congregation of Banaras, acknowledging receipt of donations.
Welcome back, everybody. And welcome to our next panel member, next speaker, Sundarpal Singh Ji. Sundarpal Singh Ji, I understand you're a recent transplant from Chandigarh to the Surrey area. Tell us how the transition is going.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for having me here on the conference. Adjusting well, trying to cope with the changed lifestyle, but essentially, since we arrived in the midst of a pandemic, we're still adjusting to it, trying to figure out different things. Yeah, it's necessarily big change for me, since I've been coming here for almost 6 years now for running the Gurbani 101 track at SikhRI leadership program at Mission Valley. So yeah, I've been here for a while now. So
good. And so we want to thank you on behalf of SikhRI for your contributions to the SikhRI program, as well as other avenues. And wanted to start off by asking you the inspiration behind your talk today.
Yeah, so like all the gurus, Guru Teghbahadar Sahib is also stereotyped a lot in certain ways. Mostly, he's shown as a recluse, since not much information is available regarding his life or his stay during those 20 years in Bakala before he became the Guru. So this stereotype is further, hardened by the way his revealed Bani is, seen and interpreted, which has a certain slant, people think. So I thought it might be a good idea to, look at the Guru's engagement at different levels and show how, infinitely dynamic the Guru personality is, and how active and diplomatically engaged he was as the leader of the community. No matter what the circumstances, his response to different situations was essentially based on the universal divine principles of God.
It's interesting you bring up the word misconceptions, because that's one of the things I think it'll be interesting for our listeners to hear about. What are the historical misconceptions that you will be speaking about today specifically?
I think essentially I'm gonna basically present that divinely people, or divine-like people, rise above the worldly considerations, as Harinder Viji just alluded to in so many different ways, and that they make decisions based on the, just as I mentioned, universal principles of truth and justice, and that they uphold the basic human rights of individual dignity and liberty. And second, would be that it's not a very good idea to try to stereotype or box the Guru's personality, who's divine-like, in certain human frame of understanding.
Okay. I think both of those clarifications you provide will be very interesting, and I look forward to them. At the end of your discussion, what are some things you'd like to leave? Let's say maybe 2 or 3 things you'd like to leave the audience with.
As I mentioned before, Guru's personality is often, boxed and interpreted along, one single understanding or view that, he had a withdrawn personality. But when we look at his community and diplomatic engagements outside, a very different image of the Guru emerges, which we will discuss, in my presentation next. So I think let's begin with my presentation, which is on the topic of the politics of the sword warrior.
And that'll be specifically interesting for us on how those lessons that you'll provide through your presentation is something we can apply in today's world for improvements, enhancements in both SikhRI and the world at the larger level. So please, I welcome you to begin your presentation, Sundar Singh ji.
Thank you. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Today I'm going to talk about Guru Teghbahadar Sahib's politics. In simple words, what does the Guru teach us about how to deal with difficult situations and what yardsticks to use when faced with adversities in life? So let's begin. So as a leader, community building is not an easy task, especially if you are working for everyone's betterment and it is hurting a special interest group. So while the Guru worked to further build and strengthen the community, he had to face detractors, some of whom were violent and who also undermined the Sikh institutions. Well, generally speaking, under the circumstances where people around you are constantly scheming against you, it becomes really difficult to, keep everyone together as a community. So we will see how the Guru dealt with the adversaries and how his approach changed based on the issues and the parties involved. And we will do this through 3 case studies. We will take 1 case study each from within the family, within the community, and the external world. We will learn more about the people listed here when we go through the presentation. So as the story goes, as soon as Guru Harkrishan Sahib passed away and informed the Sangat that the next Guru Baba was at Bakala, many Guru imposters cropped up and set up their seats at Bakala in order to lay claims to the divine throne of Guru Nanak Sahib's house. There were predominantly 22 claimants. Among them, the prominent ones were Meenas of Amritsar, descendants of Surajmal, and many imposters from the Sodhi clan. Meenas were essentially those who followed Prithvi Chand, the eldest son of Guru Ramdas Sahib, who had started his own parallel line after the Guru selected his younger brother Arjun to succeed him. Surajmal was the son of Guru Hargobind Sahib, the 6th Guru, and among the Sodhis, one of the major claimants was Teghbahadar, who proved to be the biggest troublemaker. Now let's look at what was the position of Teghbahadar within the family. Since Teghbahadar was the eldest son of Baba Gurudev Ji, who in turn was the eldest son of Guru Hargobind Sahib, he believed that he was the rightful owner of the Guruship. His other claim to Guruship, interestingly, was that he had the original Adi Granth, which was written by Bhai Gurdas under the supervision of Guru Arjan Sahib. He believed that since he had the original manuscript of the Sikh scripture, he was the actual Guru. So if you look at the chart, he was the nephew of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, Baba Gurudev Ji being the brother of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib. So Teghbahadar was one of the many claimants who were sitting in Bakala, where this whole game of claims to the Guruship was playing out before the Guru was discovered by Makhan Shah Lubana. In order to establish himself, Teghbahadar had also put up his tent and bought courtiers and mahants to serve him to create a show. So still the Guru was discovered by Makhan Shah Lubana and then identified by Baba Gurudev Ji, the head priest, and the Prime Minister of the Guru's court, Diwan Dargamal. And he was offered the royal regalia given by Guru Harkrishan Sahib. So once the Guru was established, fake Gurus started leaving slowly, but Teghbahadar remained adamant and stayed put. He continued to run his parallel court. But that was not enough. He wasn't satisfied with just running a parallel court. So he started scheming against the Guru. And the real trouble started when he hired a rogue named Singh, who further engaged professional mercenaries to eliminate the Guru. So once when the Guru's court was over and the attendees had left, a group of mercenaries attacked the Guru. A few Sikhs who were there along with the Guru gave a fight, while other Sikhs returned. In the meanwhile, Guru was shot by a Tirmal, who also took away offerings from the Guru's court and looted other things before running away. The attack was foiled, and the master only received a bullet scratch. The Sikhs chased Tirmal and his party up to where they were staying and took away everything, including the offerings, Tirmal's personal items, and Kartarpuri beard. Now, when the Guru saw the Sikhs return with the offerings, personal belongings of Tirmal and the Kartarpuri beard, he advised them, which the Sikh tradition has preserved. And I'm going to reproduce two quotes here. One is from Guru Bilas Pashahi Dasmi by Sukha Singh. So when he sees the Sikhs with Tirmal's belongings, first he offers his reaction. And he says, even though Tirmal's actions were not right, it does not suit us to, return his actions in kind and be disturbed by what he did. Otherwise, there will be no difference between us and him. So next, he offered his advice as recorded in Suraj Parkash by Kavi Santokh Singh. He asked the Sikhs to, forgive Tirmal and return all his belongings, as well as what he had looted from the Guru's court. But since Qurbani was dearest to the Sikhs, some Sikhs might have insisted upon, keeping at least the Kartarpuri beard. The Guru asked the Sikhs to return even that, since both the Jyot and the Jugat, the wisdom and the way, were manifested in the person of the Guru itself. Now, one thing that I want to bring to everyone's attention is that sometimes, we end up distorting the Guru's personality or see only a part of it based on how the Guru is described in history or in certain historical episodes. For instance, because we do not know much about the public life of the Guru before he became the Guru, we paint him as a recluse or someone who did not play an active role in the community affairs earlier. Similarly, this act of him, forgiving Tirmal might be seen as a sign of having a, quote unquote, softer personality, so to speak. We do similar things with other Guru persons as well when we say things like, the Guru was a great poet, the Guru was a great warrior, or the Guru was very peaceful or very warrior-like. But the point is that the Guru being divine-like and perfect is all of these things at the same time and still beyond all these, worldly qualities. So we will find many parallels of many such acts of different Guru persons in other Guru persons. For example, another parallel of this act of the Guru would be, Guru Amardas Sahib. So when Bhai Datu, the son of Guru Angad Sahib, the second Guru, did not like the fact that Guruship went to Guru Amardas Sahib, who was the third Guru, he went to the court of the Guru and kicked Guru Amardas Sahib. So the devotees were naturally shocked. But the Guru got up and with humility, touched the feet of Bhai Datu, saying that due to his own old age, his bones have become hard and it must have hurt Bhai Datu's tender foot. Also, to probably avoid further friction, Guru Amardas Sahib actually left Govindwal Sahib after that and went to his native village, Basarke, and started propagating Sikhi from there. So that's another parallel we have of humility. So coming back to Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, our next case study is from his community life. After the death of Meherban, who was a descendant of Prithi Chand, Harji Meena was installed in his place in 1640. He now controlled the Darbar Sahib complex. So the absence of the 6th, 7th and 8th Gurus from the region for a while helped the Meenas establish control over the Gurdwaras in the region. So in 1664, when Guru Teghbahadar Sahib came to Amritsar to pay a visit, the priests there closed the doors of Darbar Sahib on the Guru, on the behest of Harji, as the tradition describes it. So the Guru did not leave immediately. He sort of waited for a while near Akal Takht Sahib. Now the place is called Tham Sahib, the pillar of patience where the Guru sat. And then he got up to leave the city. But on his way out of the city, he was, greeted by one Mata Hariya from village Valla, who took him to his place and, served him there. So when the Sikhs, especially women folk of the city, came to know about the incident, they, with the help of Makhan Shah, got the gates of the Darbar Sahib opened. They collected gifts and offerings and went to village Valla and prayed for forgiveness. So the Guru finally blessed the women. Now, as opposed to the incident with Tirmal, when it came to a Sikh institution or community space, even though the Guru did not fight or argue, but he did not leave immediately either. He probably let the situation escalate to the point, where the faithfuls would themselves get inspired and learn about the incident and get together and reclaim the institution. Because you just cannot give away or sacrifice the institutions so carefully nurtured over many decades or centuries. It also shows us that many issues can be resolved even without violent confrontation, just by mobilizing people and opinions. Now, the third example is about dealing with external discourse. At the time of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, the whole of Northeast was a part of the extended rule of the Mughals, and Raja Ram Singh was the local king of one of the principalities of the Assam region. He was a good friend of the Guru from the time of Guru Harkrishan Sahib. So he accompanied Guru Teghbahadar Sahib on his itineraries in Bengal. Raja Ram Singh was under Aurangzeb's rule, and he is known in the history to have pacified Aurangzeb multiple times and also, advised him to not use force against the Guru, since Emperor used to get intelligence to the effect that the Guru was politically active and that he was, organizing communities against the Mughal state. Meanwhile, a local tribe, Ahom, attacked Guwahati and wrested control of the city from the Mughal authorities. The leader of that tribe was a monarch named Spangmang, who was also known by the name Chakradhwaj Singh. So when Aurangzeb got news of it, he appointed Raja Ram Singh to get the city back from the Ahoms. This is the same region Kamrup falls in. The place at that time was known for sorcery and black magic. People were, scared to venture into that land. Ram Singh was aware of it, so he sought the help of Guru to accomplish the task. The Guru assured the Raja of his help. So both left Dhaka together sometime around December 1668, and they reached Assam in February 1669. So as the forces under Raja Ram Singh were approaching Guwahati, Ahoms sent in a woman who did black magic to counter Ram Singh's army. The army of Ram Singh was camped at Dhubri with Guru Teghbahadar Sahib. Only a small river separated the woman and her team of magicians from Ram Singh's army. So she tried all sorts of black magic on the army. First, she is said to have thrown a 26 feet long stone at the Guru and the army, and later an uprooted tree as well. But none of these seem to be working. Finally, Guru Teghbahadar Sahib is said to have shot an arrow, and the magic of the whole team really died out. So the team fell at the feet of the Guru and asked for forgiveness. The Guru forgave them and assured them that he did not mean harm and that he was there to broker peace. So after advising Ram Singh to not go to war, he left for Bihar on a short journey. But while the Guru was away in Bihar, both sides started to prepare for a war. Ram Singh lay a siege to Ahom fort. In the ensuing battle, Ram Singh's nephew got killed. There was a prolonged siege. Meanwhile, Ram Singh also learned that his son was killed by Aurangzeb, who had kept his son in his captivity as security. Ram Singh then turned his back on Aurangzeb. He realized the futility of the war. The Guru took this opportunity and sent an envoy to broker peace, and finally a settlement was reached, as a result of which Guwahati remained independent of the Mughal rule. As per the agreement, boundaries of the territories were marked up in the presence of the Guru so that no side could violate others' territory. Since the armies on both the sides were spared a war and the bloodshed, they were extremely grateful and happy with the outcome. The peace settlement was celebrated by a joint homage by both the armies to a previously built shrine of Guru Nanak Sahib there. A mound of peace at Tubri was erected with the red earth brought by the soldiers of both the armies from adjoining Rangmati and other areas. This monument stands there even today, commemorating the Guru's mediation. So, after going through these three examples, what do we learn about the Guru's principles, politics, and their way of dealing with discord, hostility, and violence? Well, one thing is that a Sikh is not supposed to take attacks and affronts personally when directed to their person. At times, there may be a need for a distinction between whether an issue is about personal ego or if it's a question of one's dignity and sovereignty. Most of the times, in case of a discord, more than the actual issue, it's about the individual ego and stubborn positions one takes. But when there are larger things at stake, like institutions and liberty of individuals or communities, then there is no room for compromise. Since the aggressor is not only attacking an individual, but also their convictions, ideas, and right to, live the way they see fit. So when it comes to freedom of expression, battle of ideals, Sikhs do not leave even an inch of ground, as is evident from the Guru's decision to give the ultimate sacrifice of his life when the Kashmiri Pandits came to seek the Guru's refuge to escape, Aurangzeb's forcible conversion, even when the Guru himself did not subscribe to the worldview of the Brahmins. So I think that is the crux of the Guru's message to us. Thank you. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you, Sundar Singh Ji, for an enlightening presentation. And our next speaker will be Jasleen Kaur from Maryland, who is a tremendous photographer and an amazing singer, besides being an incredible writer. We truly enjoyed your thought-provoking Shabda-inspired blogs. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Jasleen.
That's very kind. I've been with SikhRI for almost 3 years now as a researcher, and it's true, I do like to sing. I'm trying to learn how to play the guitar, much to the chagrin of my entire family. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's pretty much all you need to know.
And with the audience, I want to share that during this interim time frame, we also found out we have a connection to Kansas City. Just like I mentioned to you, the audience earlier, that Harinder and Harinder's Mamadi and my father were dear friends. Jasleen, I just found out only a minute or two ago that Jasleen's grandfather and my father were also dear friends. And I'm not sure I can contain the emotion, as a matter of fact, for the audience, which also means that Jasleen's mother and myself played at family events together at some time. This in itself is the consciousness of the Guru bringing us together. We look forward to your presentation. I'm really intrigued by your talk. You've chosen to speak about death, Jasleen, which in most cases is uncomfortable. Tell us why you're daring to speak about this subject.
I grew up having a pretty good relationship with the idea of death because of how my parents kind of raised all of me and my siblings. My mom always kind of framed it as like a kind of returning, like a long-awaited return or a kind of going home. And collectively, between me and my siblings, we've all experienced death at a pretty young age with like people our age. And so it was a thing that we kind of had to understand a little bit more growing up. And there was always this kind of like emphasis on fostering like a relationship with death instead of a fear of it. And then, yeah, I don't know, I come across so many people who are afraid of it, and I get that. But I actually found myself in college, like experiencing, friends losing people that they loved. And I just started to have that same kind of like thought about death. And it wasn't so much that it was a thing that was scary, but more that it was a thing that was like quote unquote bad, or a thing that took people away. And I remember really struggling with that, and finding myself kind of going away from what I knew to be true and understood to be true as a kid. And I remember having this dream, which like personal anecdote, but maybe it will give you a better understanding of where I sit now, where I was like sitting in a room, my friend's dad had just passed away, and I saw this like, I guess what would be my brain's personification of death kind of come into the room. And I remember in the dream feeling that this was like the antithesis of all things kind of good and maybe like quote unquote holy. And so I started to like try to get it to go away by like invoking the gurus. I was like, get away from me. And I remember I sat down at this table with this personification that my brain had kind of concocted, and it pulled out like a sketch pad, and it had all these like paintings, and the kind of sentiment was like, this is just how it goes. Like, this is the universal experience, and everything that you finish, every book that begins must end, every painting that you begin must be finished, and like that's just the way it goes. And that felt like kind of a recall to how I was raised. And now like walking with Suluk Melanoma all these like months with the team, and really like being immersed in that, especially at a time where like death feels like it is swallowing all of us up, like all around us with this pandemic. I do think that it's an important thing for us to talk about, and sort of selfishly is a thing that has been important for me to like work through over the past year. And it is the constant in our lives, death and taxes. So yeah, we might as well try to figure out how to have that relationship, because it's not going anywhere. So
yep. I think that the essence of what you mentioned is that in many ways, death, just like as Guru Sahib says, that inspires life, and the inspiration and lessons we get from the moments of death really do bring life onto us, and in that may well also be presented in the Mahalla Nama Bani. And so I know you're going to speak on that today.
Yeah.
Tell us your thoughts on Mahalla Nama Bani and how you encountered it and your studies on it so far.
Yeah. So, I mean, growing up, I feel like I heard a lot of people saying that it was a little bit too morbid or like depressing. And of course, like with the parents I have who have been kind of had like a good relationship with death, my mom was always like, I think it's so beautiful. And I was like, why is it that some people feel the exact opposite? And why is it that some people think it's so morbid? And I think something that I will discuss in my presentation and probably in the Q&A as well is like the gentleness of that Bani that has now come across after having worked with it with the team on the Guru Granth Sahib project. The like loving way that the Guru speaks to us and understands our condition. And I think sometimes we read that nuance out of things because it's easier to be hard on ourselves about where we are in our journeys. And so, yeah, if I can get one thing across even before the presentation starts, it's that the biggest shift for me in understanding this Bani has been with the like tone and the gentleness and the kind of forgiveness that kind of permeates the whole thing, and how life-changing that is for me. and I hope it will be for other people as well.
That's a great segue into an item that I think what we all try to do, which is immersion. And hopefully your presentation will help us in that immersion process of Gurbani to come. Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you, Jasleen. We look forward to the presentation.
Thank you. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Today I'm going to be talking about exploring death in Salok Mahela Nova, some background on why I've decided to talk about this today, outside of just like working on it in the Guru Granth Sahib project. I've thought a lot, especially in the past year, as like a lot of people have passed away due to the pandemic and due to the farmers' protest. I've thought a lot about death and how we conceive of it. And how it's this thing that we all experience and we all have to go through ourselves, but it seems like a thing we are constantly learning how to understand and live with. And a lot of times we don't understand it, and a lot of times our relationship with it is one based in fear. And I grew up sort of with a uniquely healthy relationship with death because of how I was raised and the experiences I had as a kid with death. But I did find myself losing that relationship as I got older, and kind of lived long enough in the world to see that a lot of people are afraid of it, or if they're not afraid of it, they think of it at least as like kind of a dark and bad thing. And so I wanted to take this Bani that a lot of people see as being about death in general and put it in conversation with both like popular understandings that we have of death outside of maybe like the religious world, and also Sikh understandings of death, and how sometimes we take our fear and we read it back into the Banis that we're looking at. So I wanted to start with looking at just like popular conceptions of death. So I thought just a lot about how we talk about like the Grim Reaper and death as a thing to avoid and a thing to fear. I think that a lot of our popular Sikh understandings kind of imbibe those popular understandings despite what Bani tells us. I remember talking to my grandpa a little bit about this, and he always quotes these lines where it's like death is going to take you and beat you over the head and seize you by your hair, and I've put a line here where the translation talks about death being on the prowl with its mouth wide open. And so I don't think that fear of death is based in nothing. I don't think that we're not getting that from somewhere. But I think what we tend to do is like read these lines about death being personified as this like scolding and aggressive thing, this thing that is kind of hovering over our heads, just waiting to snatch us up. And we don't read the lines that come before and after those lines that tell us about how our ideas about death, as this thing to be feared, are not based in reality, that like this is a thing that we all must do, and those lines really are just about how we conceive of death. And so what we tend to do is, even in shabads that offer us antidotes to our fear, we tend to just focus on the lines that amplify that fear. And so I wanted to talk about death in Salok Mahela Nova because of all of this. And I wanted to just start before we get into it by saying that I believe in my own kind of understanding of this Bani, and having sat with it for the past few months, I do think that it is a very gentle and loving Bani, and I didn't think that before. And I'll explain more what I mean by that later on, but I find it like very encouraging, very gentle, very soft in a lot of places. And when it's not soft, I think the Guru does a purposeful kind of narrative shift to make things in the first person, even though they're talking to all of us. And I think that it's this gentle kind of shaking out of forgetfulness and shaking into remembrance that is repeated throughout the lines that I find so like loving and patient. So I'll talk about some key themes. We see death as the greatest fear that humans have, is the fear of death. And that is pointed to in a lot of places in Gurbani. But that fear is not rooted in anything other than our own ideas about our lives and the ends of our lives. And because of that fear, death is this great kind of paralyzer. But the Guru takes those ideas and actually frames death as this great reminder, as this universal experience that can be the thing that nudges us into remembrance, the things that we came here to do with our human lives. And I think the Guru is kind of posing a question through all these saloks of like what does it mean to do what we are here for, and how does that action, how does that change in our behavior cause death to kind of lose its terror. I don't think that this Bani is just about death. I think it's about something much bigger than that, if I can say that. But I will say that the poetic devices that the Guru uses are, again, pushing for that like gentle tone, that loving tone, the constant like introspection and self-address, and the repetition that on its own actually tends to sound like how it sounds when your thoughts are going through your head again and again, coming back to the same ideas again and again, gently, as if it's this kind of circular thought process that's happening in our own heads, I think is so beautiful. He addresses the mind, he addresses the being, he addresses the self, he calls us friend, he also calls us crazy people, which I think when I first read it, I thought was a little bit harsh, but then I kind of thought of it more like how when you're a kid and your parents are like, calm down for a second, it's going to be okay. You're being crazy. You're being mad. And I think that that's kind of the understanding I have now that I've sat with it for a little bit longer. And then he does this thing where he takes us through all of the kind of ways that we can move through our paths and develop as human beings who are meant to remember, who are meant to praise and identify. And he takes us to the proverbial mountain and then brings us back down every so often to say, I know all this is overwhelming. And I know that I'm asking you to do a lot. And I understand that you're a human in the world and this is your condition. And it's hard to like kind of detach yourself from the constant entanglements that come up as you live a life in the world. But he simplifies it every so often and says, like, if you just do this every day and night, I promise you this will happen. I promise you you'll feel the presence. I promise you you'll be able to get rid of your fear and your ego and you'll be free. So I've put a whole bunch of lines here because I want to really emphasize that this is repeated throughout from the very beginning to the very end. And it's this theme of like praising and remembering and identifying with Ikonkar, with the one light, which is our translation of Hari, with the earth knower, our translation of Gobind. And there's this kind of like singing that he starts with. So it's like this physical beginning, because later when he talks about it, he says like, I know I've told you to do all these things, but just like sing the praises every day. And like that physical thing, starting at the tongue and starting at the ears, with your physical senses, that's the way to begin. He brings it back to like, what is the simplest way to begin praise? What is the simplest way to move into remembrance? And it's to begin by listening to identification of with the one light with your ears. It's by praising the virtues of the earth knower with your tongue. These are things that we can all do. And if we can't sing, it happens. If we can't sing, we can listen. And if we can't listen, we can feel. And we have these senses as humans in the world, and they're gifts. And maybe right now, because it's the nature of the human condition, maybe our senses are steeped in a kind of flavor that is temporary. Maybe our senses are overwhelmed by the temporary and we are forgetting what we came here for. But we can move out of that and use those same senses for something bigger. And he says that behavior and like making that into a habit allows us to become free in the world, because we are no longer full of fear. We are no longer consuming and accumulating all of our things and thinking of them as ours, which is not to say like don't have things, don't have relationships, don't love your family. It is to say don't let your emotions and your attachments drive your behavior. Feel your feelings. That's a gift too, right? Feelings are a part of the senses, but also never think of these things as yours. And if you don't think of them as yours anymore, you won't be so terrified all the time of losing them. So I think that that's really powerful. He talks about this kind of steadiness that happens when we're detached, and it's not the detachment of a renunciate in the classical sense. It's the detachment of someone who is a person in the world, who has relationships and things and experiences those relationships, but they are rooted in the eternal and not the temporary. And when we do that, our fear of death goes away because we know that that love that we have and those relationships that we have, we're not rooted in such temporary things. And maybe people leave the physical world, but that's not the end. And he talks about how all of this can turn you into like a carefree person. He uses the metaphor of like a wall of sand to talk about the world. And he talks a lot about the kind of temporariness of the world. And when we were talking about that in the commentary meetings, we talked about how like when kids build a sandcastle and then they like wait for it to be high tide and they watch with glee as it kind of dissolves back into the ocean. And that kind of carefree thing of like building up your castle, yes, accumulating your thing, putting your effort into some kind of worldly comfort or worldly thing. Sure, do that. But can you let it go when the tide comes? Can you live in a way where you're not afraid of losing the castle? So I think that that's one big theme. And then kind of building off of that, talking about the human condition. One of the things that I think is so gentle about this Bani is that Guru Teghbahadar Sahib constantly says, like, I understand. I understand that this is part of what you're experiencing because you're a person in the world. But I'm asking you to keep recognizing that the things in front of you and the things that you have are not all that there is. I'm asking you to zoom out, look at things from an aerial perspective, and live knowing what the real kind of purpose is. And so he reminds us multiple times, you know, your wealth and your spouse and your property, you cannot believe those things to be your own. And like no one is your constant companion. And I think a lot of times when we talk about these kinds of lines, we're like, yeah, we have to detach from our family members and we have to not have relationships. And that's not what he's saying, because he also had relationships in the world, but he lived with that carefree kind of mindset that takes effort to build and inculcate. And so when it came to losing things, he knew that he wasn't really losing things that were his. And part of what I really like is that towards the middle of the Bani, he says, you know, you made so many efforts to be comfortable. You didn't make any efforts to rid yourself of pain and suffering. An example that we used in the commentary was like the way that we're constantly kind of trying to like build our resume and further our job and like build ourselves up in our careers and just like all of these kind of tangible worldly things. And then when it comes to like the internal, we tend to kind of let our like mental and emotional health slide. And so he's saying like, I know that you've done this and I know that this is part of your condition. And then he says, this all happened within the command, within the will of the one light. And I am telling you that I understand your condition and so does the one. And there's something like deeply comforting about that because there's never like a moment where Guru Teghbahadar Sahib is like scolding us or telling us that it's too late. He's being very understanding because he knows what it is like to struggle with these things day to day. And that brings us to the next theme, which is that it's never too late. It's not too late. And so he uses this phrase, Patatutarin, which we talked a lot about as a team and discussed it as like the emancipator of the fallen, the one who frees those who stray. Maybe you're not, you know, doing the things that you want to be doing. Maybe you got distracted. Maybe you built up all your attachments and your entanglements and you think that it's too late. But even then, the one Ekunkar, the one light, is the one who frees those who have strayed, is the one who dispels our fears and helps the helpless. And there's this reminder that we ought to know, even when we're overwhelmed, when we're drowning in our worldly things, and we think that it's too late, the one always dwells with us. And then I brought this last stanza in because towards the end, Guru Sahib is saying, you know, physically your head has started to kind of tremble. You can't maybe think as well. Maybe you can't like imagine things in the same way that you used to be able to when you were a kid. Your eyes have become devoid of light. Your feet have started to kind of wobble. Even then, he is saying, we don't immerse ourselves in the essence, in the identification of the one. And the implication there is that like, you should still be doing it even now, even if you think it's too late and like you're fading physically. Why aren't you doing it now? And so this idea that it's like too late or no longer possible is not there at all. And I think that that's such a gentle and like loving message to give to us. I just wanted to end with a few questions because I will not sit here and tell you that I've figured it out. I haven't. I'm still very much walking with this Bani, and I think will be for the rest of my life, because that's kind of, I mean, death is a thing forever. So I'm sure I'll come back to it. I would like to leave you with 4 questions. Will we learn the lessons that death has to teach us? That things are temporary, that our purpose in this world is to remember and praise and identify with Ikonkar. And will we foster a relationship with death in place of our fear? Will we be able to confront death in a way that is forgiving to ourselves and just like loving, instead of based in being afraid? Will we begin to walk the path of praise, remembrance, and identification, which is also, you know, a question about, will we begin to walk the path of freedom? Even though it is overwhelming to live a life in the world and to be afraid and to be worried all the time about losing things. The thing that I want to leave everyone with, that I keep coming back to, so maybe it'll help you too, is that in that salok, the Guru says, start with the tongue, start with the ears. Do this physical praise and it will move you into remembrance. Do this remembrance and it will move you into identifying with the one, and it will take your fear from your body. It'll free you. So I guess I will leave you with that. That's all I have for my presentation. Thank you for listening. And I look forward to the discussion. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you, Jasleen, for that wonderful presentation that is just that we just concluded, and the questions that have come forth are obviously in some ways similar to what you've asked, and we also welcome Sundarpal Singh Ji back as part of our panel discussion for this segment. And I know that one of the things that you mentioned at the very end, Jasleen Kaurji, was about freedom, because when you said that Slok Melanoma isn't really about death and it's about being free, can you talk more about your ideas on that and where else that might be reflected in Gurbani?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I guess I did trick people a little bit with the title of the talk, but I think I would, I mean, this is my understanding, so take it with, you know, a pound of salt, but I think the use of death in Gurbani, not just in this particular Bani, is really about what our greatest fear is and what we see as the kind of greatest end to our lives from our small kind of perspectives. And so it makes sense that that's the greatest reminder for us. You could say the same for like reminders about time. Death kind of functions in that way. I think the Bani is about attachment and fear and how paralyzing those things are. And that includes the fear of death, this kind of greatest fear of ours. But a thing that is constantly referred to is this idea of freedom throughout the Bani as well. And I think if you think about like other places where death is mentioned in Gurbani, there's like lines that say like the one who has like killed their ego, so they're dead while they're alive. Like there's references to that a lot of the time. And it can be confusing, but it's about this kind of understanding of our lives outside of maybe the like lines of life and death and the ways that we think about them. And that freedom is not something that is granted to us when we leave the earth, that we can strive for freedom, and we ought to strive for freedom while we're still alive, because this is the time that matters. This is the time that we are given these bodies and these lives, short as they may be, these bodies temporary as they may be, to engage in remembrance. And so, yes, it's not about death. Yes, it's about freedom. I think one of the words that's used is like gut in the Bani, if I'm remembering correctly, which actually has like a root word that refers to movement. And so I think when we talk about death as this great paralyzer and what it means to move, to be able to actually move in the world and be free and carefree, I think that's really what the takeaway is here. It's about not being so afraid or paralyzed by our attachments, in that we kind of spend day to day either like worrying about accumulating more or worrying about losing what we have. And so I think the freedom comes when we can kind of see the larger picture and get out of that. We talk about a cage in the commentary, but that kind of cage of fear. Yeah.
And Jasleen, I thought that comment at the very end about immersion and being free brings it together for the consciousness. You have to be free to immerse into the Bani. And I think that's really, obviously there's blessings to go along with it. Thank you for the additional explanation, and we'll come back to you in a minute. And I'd like to take the next question to Sundarpal Singh Ji. Sundarpal Singh Ji, could you speak a little bit about the kindness as an expression of the Guru in the realms of all that you spoke about, family, political, and the societal side? What does kindness play a role, and how?
I think kindness as a human quality is something very beautiful. But when we look at it from a Sikh perspective, when we look at the Guru personality and we say the Guru is kind, that I think idea of kindness is coming from a very different place, as I observe, as I see it, or as I experience it. It's coming from a place of, absolute understanding or absolute love, which is divine love, and which is not relative in nature. It's the kind where one, rises above the relativities of life. That's how I like to explain it. This idea of relativities of life versus the absolute aspect of life. And that's where the Guru consciousness resides. So when the Guru is kind, Guru isn't kind in a particular mundane way, but in a way where the Guru sees the divine in everyone. So it's that kind of kindness, which is full of love, empathy, based on seeing the divine in everything.
That's, I think, another great example of how we can bring into real life the examples of Guru Sahib. And that is what you mentioned, brings us to compassion and brings us to the kindness that we need to express for both in our family, but what's beyond our family. Because for the human family, it's that worldly consciousness that we need to ensure that we have. And only the Guru can give that to us. One of the things about Salok Melanoma, Jasleen Kaur, is detachment and Bairag, as one of our individuals in the chat room presented a little bit. Speak to us a little bit more about Bairag, detachment, and freedom through your learnings of Salok Melanoma.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think something I've been thinking about is like maybe the reason we're so afraid of like death is also because we think of our relationships as temporary, or we think about them as things that we are not really supposed to have. I think we tend to think about renunciation or detachment in kind of classically religious sort of frameworks where maybe you're not physically going to a mountain to like isolate from your family, but there's like a harshness that we read into ideas of detachment and renunciation. And I think within this Bani, something that is really, really like hammered across multiple times is that this kind of renunciation and detachment is not the same as what we think it is when we think of like a yogi or a sadhu sitting somewhere far away from their family. It is not to say that we do not love the people around us and have relationships and care for them. It's not even to say that we don't seek comfort in the world, because I think sometimes we also think that we're not supposed to like seek like material comforts. That's okay. But are we attached to them? Do they drive us? And so it's that difference between like having these things, accumulating them because that's part of like being a human in the world. And the Guru's not asking us to not be of the world, but what does it mean to be carefree about the things that you have? I had used that like sandcastle analogy that we had talked about in the commentary meetings. It's this idea of like not being driven by our emotions and our feelings and our attachments, whether those are relationships or material things. It's not being redirected by the temporary. It's kind of being centered on the eternal and also being of the world. And so there's like a great nuancing that happens when we're talking about what it means to be detached or what it means to be a renunciate while being of the world. And it's like, can you live in the world and have these things and have these relationships? And also, can every breath be remembrance? Like, can every breath be praise? Can every breath be one that like helps you inculcate those virtues of the one? So there's not this like harsh kind of like punishing of like being a person in the world. We didn't sign up to get these bodies and come here, but what are we doing with our time and our lives and our energy? And what are we seeing as important? Are we zooming out and understanding what we came here for? So I think that there's like because I mean, you said we live in a world of paradoxes, like because we're people, we tend to like read things really in a really binary way. And I think in this Bani, the Guru is doing a really important thing, which is like adding nuance to that idea so that we don't feel so like guilty and we don't feel like it's such a difficult thing to do. We all have that potential. Yeah.
Thank you, but I would still want to come back to paradox because it is constant struggle. Pal palte, every single instance, we're having that struggle of compassion, kindness, and freedom to the malevolence, the attachments that we all have. That's something we all struggle with on a moment by moment basis. And I want to come back to that later. But for the moment, I wanted to go back to Sundarpal Singh Ji because he mentioned also renunciation in his presentation. And I wanted to find out if you could please share additional detail about countering these stereotypes about Guru Teghbahadar Ji's life and personality about renunciation, and how that contextualize that into today's world for our lives as well, Sundarpal.
Yeah, sure. But I would like to slightly speak to the question you posed in earlier, because this idea of detachment comes quite often, and I personally believe most of us, most of the times, are torn between. We see it as either this or that. But the reality is, what the Guru is guiding us to do is to develop the love of Ik Onkar in a way that that's the only love you seek. For instance, there's a slok where it says, develop the love of Ik Onkar like the fish loves the water. Just as the fish cannot see life beyond water, you have to see your existence through that. But most of the times we understand faith or religion in a very superficial way, where we have our personal lives, we separate from our quote unquote religious life. And then we try to quote unquote balance them. And that's where the problem arises. Guru Sahib is not saying that, keep two separate lives and try to balance them. What Guru Sahib is saying is that develop that one absolute love through which you need to learn to deal with your worldly affairs. And when that happens, when you have developed that love, then everything becomes intuitive. Then you don't have to do these mental gymnastics of trying to create frames in the mind of what is detachment, what is attachment, and how do I balance that.
Thank you for the additional detail and description. I love it. I just hope that we can all continue to work on our efforts to apply it, because that is a daily struggle. I wanted to ask on a more specific item for you, Justine Kaurji, and that is, you mentioned poetic devices in your presentation in Slok Melanoma. And maybe both of you can speak a little bit more about those poetic devices, yourself and Sundarpal Singh Ji, and having both worked on this Gurbani during the Guru Granth Sahib Seed project. So please, Justine Ji first.
Yeah, so I mentioned kind of the general poetics that I found to be important in creating that like gentle and loving tone. Something I kind of want to re-emphasize, because we are talking about this like daily struggle, is there's like, I don't know if I can say like a dance of the sloks, I'll probably get in trouble for saying that, but they're not like entirely linear. There's like a couple of times where the Guru takes us through like kind of takes us along on a path. We said in the commentaries, takes us up the mountain and then kind of comes back down to where we are. So there's this kind of like play that even happens within the sloks where it's like, yes, this is overwhelming, I'm just showing you where you can get, but I'm going to come back down to your level. And I think that that's really lovely. I also wanted to talk about two like specific things that I didn't mention in the presentation. The use of eulogy is what we have called it on the team, of like multiple attributes, multiple names of Ikonkar being invoked. So we have like Gobind, the earth knower, Hari, one light, or the all pervasive, or in some places like the dispeller of fear. We have that emancipator of the fallen. We have the helper of the helpless, the adorable one, the one who ought to be adored. And so I think, this is my reading of it, I think when we tell people to remember or praise, right? If that's our goal, giving us those kinds of like threads to pull at, of like different kind of facets of the one that we can, that we can identify with, I think is a really like beautiful and like helpful tool in a way for like us as seekers. What resonates with you? You know, what speaks to you? It doesn't have to be all the attributes on the same sort of level, but those are ways to identify with the one. When we talk about like, oh, you know that person, tell me about them. When you know somebody better, you can name more things about them, right? They're not just, oh, that person is nice. It's, you know, they love their family, they're kind, they're all these things. So that kind of like relationship with the one, I think, is really being emphasized through invoking so many of those attributes. I also wanted to talk about the word gut, which I don't know if I've said that right because I'm, you know, bear with me, but pitcher. And this like, this symbol of the pitcher being used for the heart and the body. And we see that in Asakiwar too. We see like this metaphor of like the vessel being invoked at the very end for the body. And I thought a lot about like what that means and like what are we filled with and what are we like kind of pouring out all around us? How do our like internal changes in behavior and thought affect the external world and like vice versa? There's two sloks where Guru Sahib like invokes this idea of the dog. And there's the one slok that starts as like, when a body that doesn't have remembrance is one that is like the body of a pig or a dog. And it's this idea of like consuming filth, kind of like being greedy, never satisfied, with dogs, like stray dogs, like wandering around. But then in the very next slok, he keeps that symbolism of the dog and talks about a dog that is kind of like trained, who stays in the dwelling of the owner, who remembers the owner at all times, who sings praises like single-mindedly with this like focused mind. And that, I think, ties into this idea of like, what is a vessel? You can have the body of a dog, you can have your vessel, and you can change what it is internally, and that's what matters. So I think that even that like play that he does with the dog being this like filth consuming thing, and then this utterly loyal and like devoted thing, is really beautiful. And it further emphasizes that we have that potential to take these bodies, the body doesn't change, but to take them kind of from the inside out and change them. So those were two specific things that, I wanted to mention.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Can you please discuss a little bit about the poetic devices in Slok Melanoma?
Do a little bit. I don't have any specific poetic device in mind, but I do have a few ideas that come to mind when I think of what just been said, and to my previous idea of, the fish in the water. Guru Sahib uses this idea of fish in the water. If I can use that analogy, it's like saying that you are in the water, but most of the times I'll use another, slok here, which says, "Jo supna ar pekhna, aise jag kho jaan." Know this word as a play or as a dream. Inme kach sacho nahi nanak bin Bhagwan. Without that Ikonkar, that Bhagwan, there's nothing real or true in this. So the idea behind real or truth here is that everything is real, because everything is divine, because everything is flowing within divine, because the divine is the water. Without the water, there is no life within the water. If we look at the paradigm of the example of the fish, sorry. So the point is, even though everything is true, but what's happening is that the creature is, or we are unaware of the water around us, and we are just focused on the food that's floating in the the water. And that's why this water has become a dream for you. And that's also the reason for most of the pains in your life. And then, it's in that context that Guru Sahib says, the person who has given up this detachment, quote unquote, which is more of actually being aware of the water around me, that's when I'm actually udas. So while I'm looking for my food and I'm eating it, I'm also udas because I'm aware of that water around me. So that really, intrigues.
I think both of you, what you said really brought it together while you were speaking to me in the context that that immersion process of Gurbani and us as our human souls, it's so important for us to let go of that attachment. And detachment and virag that are presented in Sloka Noma give us the pathway to be able to do that. And I think that really, both of yours explanation brought that into light for me. Moving in a similar section, I know that we've talked a lot about detachment. We've talked a lot about virag. Just as a final item, did either of you want to say anything more about virag or detachment and Guru Teghbahadar Ji's life and Bani?
Tasleem?
I guess an example that we use in the commentary that might be helpful for people when they're trying to think about this is one that's common in Gurbani is like the lotus, and the lotus like sitting on top of the water, connected but like untouched by the kind of like dirt and filth that exists, beneath the surface. So being able to kind of like float on the surface is, I think, where we're trying to be, and maybe that's a visual that will help people after they leave this session.
Thank you. Sundarpal Singh ji?
Yeah, so there are a few things, I would like to focus here. There's a running theme throughout the Bani, and one of the major themes within that is the limits of human life and the awareness of death and the purpose of life. Spoke to beautifully. The idea that it's when we are forgetful both our limits as human beings and the ultimate truth of inevitability of the taxes and the death. So those two things. So when we are aware of that, that's when we actually start our journey. That's our starting point. So being aware of death and the purpose of life. The next thing is once you're aware of that, what do you do in life? You learn to deal with your relationships around you, learn to deal with your aspirations of life, where you want to take your life, and the most important question of power and wealth. That's where most of the problems arise from, human aspirations to own, possess, whether it's relationships or wealth. And that's where the Guru guides us that even though they are true, but they're not really true in the sense because they're not permanent, even though they are within the creation. So we need to develop a relationship with them, keeping in mind that they're as transitory as we are, and they are just they're just with us along the path for our lives to sustain. And then the other thing, that one very important major theme that this Lean also touched was what is liberation. And as I mentioned, the idea of the absolute versus the relativity. So what Guru Sahib tells us that once we have developed that love of the divine, we are able to rise above the relativities of life. And he actually uses 3 consecutive slokas, and then he says a person who is away from both happiness and sorrow, a person who is away from both sides. Actually, he balances it. He brings both sides and not just one. Greed and attachment and pride. One who is away from both praise and slander, and for whom both iron and gold mean the same. And that's the kind of person we want to become. That's the kind of detachment we want to have. And that's when, in the later lines of the same slokas, he says, we actually truly become free, or we actually truly become, divine life.
Yeah, thank you both for those explanations. While you were talking, one of the things I was trying to tie together was between what you presented in these discussions and Harinder Singh's topic of benevolent warrior, and the quality for liberation, the quality for looking at death, and for being a warrior is courage. We all, that's a quality that we all should ask for blessings from our Guru, for courage, so we can remain detached while we live in this world, while we get ready to face death, and while we want ourselves and humanity to be liberated. And I think that really brought something. It was good to hear your in-depth discussions about that, because it allowed me to get a better understanding, and I hope the audience a better understanding how we can bring this into our lives as well. Having worked closely with Teghbahadur's Bani and history for both of you, how has your understanding of the Guru and the Guru's Bani changed or evolved? Jasleen, if you'll go first, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned this earlier, but I'll just reiterate the same point, which is that, yeah, that like kind of harshness and that fear that we tend to read into things as human beings, those dichotomies we tend to read into even like Bani, which so often says, what? It's not what you think it is. It's not, things aren't so binary as you think they are. Everything is, if we're going to talk about Ikunkar, like, don't read that into things, but we do. And I think it's a thing that we kind of always have to be aware of and try to come out of. So that like gentleness and lovingness that has come out of this Bani has actually helped me form more like of a personal relationship with Guru Teghbahadar Sahib. If I can say that, I think like, we can all sit here and tell you guys like this is who Guru Teghbahadar Sahib was, but each person has a unique relationship with the Guru and like ought to continue to foster that. And so a thing that we had said a couple years ago when we did a conference for Guru Nanak Sahib was like, if we can come away from something, from hearing all these different sort of facets of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib's life and Bani, if we can come away with one thing that we can pull at, like a thread that we can pull at as individuals, something that resonates, then that's where like the beginning of that intimate relationship comes from. And that's a gift. So I feel very lucky that I've gotten to kind of walk with this Bani and sort of maybe kookily talk to Guru Teghbahadar Sahib in my head and be like, wow, good job on that line. But yeah, I mean, that's what we're after, is like that personal relationship. And so, yeah, it's given me that. And I feel very, very lucky. And I hope other people can come away from this starting to pull at those threads a little bit.
Thank you, Jasleen Ji. Sundarpal Singh Ji?
Yeah, I think that's what big where she left the idea of personal relationship, the thread, as I mentioned earlier, most of the times we look at divine love as a one box, one separate facet of life, which we have to fulfill and just check, and we're done with it. And that's where the problem lies. When I travel with the Bani of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, as soft, as gentle, and as warm as it is, like all of us, not stereotyping there. It gently reminds me that most of your fears, most of my fears, most of my pains and sufferings in life are because of not developing that absolute love and that awareness. If I'm able to develop that awareness, that's when I'm speaking, when I'm uttering phrases, when I'm aware, that's when I'm alive. That's the kind of state Guru wants me to be in. If I'm able to do that, I think I'm close to it.
Thank you both very much. And as the chat has indicated, and my own sense, that when you were both speaking, what's really coming through today in both your presentations and your discussion is that personal relationship we have with our Guru and with Bani. That personal relationship is what's going to enlighten us, going to provide us guidance and provide us the courage to continue to feel liberated and feel blessed. Really want to thank both of you, Sundarpal Singh Ji, Jasleen Kaur Ji, for being so open in answering the questions that have come forth. And I think I missed one or two questions from the chat, so I'm sorry about that. But looks like we have a couple of minutes. There is a simple question, hopefully one of you can answer. And this individual asked that they were listening to a katha about the absolute last part of Slok Mala Noma after Bal Chutkyo Bandhan Pare. The Kathavachik was saying that the last part of the only part of the Gurbani added by Guru Gobind Singh Ji himself, if you understood that correctly. Is there any information on that? If either of you like to speak.
Well, there's research on this, but there's no direct documentary evidence to suggest that. I think most of this Bani was revealed by Guru Teghbahadar Sahib himself. And even though its revelation has been, contextually placed at different places and different situations based on how people perceive it, but I don't think there's any documentary evidence available.
Thank you. Thank you. Jasleen Ji?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that when this Bani comes out on the Guru Granth Sahib Project website, you'll be able to read a little bit about that information. The research team did a lot of research on that, and yeah, I'll just echo Surnarpal and say that they've come to the same conclusion. So yeah, that'll be offered on the website in more detail.
Great. We look forward to that. And thank you both once again, for all the information you've provided, your transparency, your openness, your honesty, your feeling of real attachment to the Guru. We talked about detachment a lot, your real attachment to the Guru. And that really came through for me and for the audience. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much, both of you. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. We'll now move to the last speaker of our conference today, and that is Inni Kaur Ji. But before I bring her on, please enjoy this 1-minute video created especially for this conference. Welcome back, everybody. And I'd like to give a very warm welcome to our next speaker, Inni Kaur Ji. Inni Kaur is a writer, a poet, an artist, and a very someone whom I hold very dear and near to my heart. She's inspired me just like other individuals. She is spoken at the U.S. Office of the Pentagon Chaplain, at numerous universities, as well as many interfaith and community gatherings. Her narratives are hidden in many books, Journey with the Gurus, Sakhi Time, and Nani Ji with Nani Ji. And believe me, my daughters use some of these, Inni Kaur Ji, and I use some of them because now we have reached the Nana Nani category. Thank you, Vaheguru, Daddy's Turban, and the Story of Us. Inni Kaur Ji, your title of your talk is Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, Voice, O Mind, Transcend. And in the write-up, you also mentioned Bhai Veer Singh Ji. Can you speak a little bit about the connection of Bhai Veer Singh to Guru Teghbahadar Sahib Ji?
Oh, well, Fateh to everyone, and to just say thank you for this very, very warm introduction. But the connection between Paisa Bhai Veer Singh Ji and Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, I can't speak to that. But what I can speak to is Paisa Paibir Singh's connection to me, or my connection to him. And I refer to him as Pitaji. So he is the one who actually has taken me from crayons to perfume in my SikhRI journey. You know, someone who has held me and made me see, give me glimpses of the Guru. And therefore, when we organized this conference and it was going on Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, my first thing was, what has Pitaji written on it? Because that's my source for my understanding. I am not at the place, and I'm not a researcher to go right to the Guru Granth Sahib, to the Bani itself. I need someone to show me the way, to say what is it and who. And so the person who I revere, the person who I have said that this is the being who is walking with me in this journey, as Professor Puran Singh is, and as another individual is, that these are the three beings that I want to take guidance from as I delve into the three Shabads of Paksha. So that's the Paibir Singh Ji connection. That is my Pitaji's connection. And I spoke, when in 2019 we had the conference on Guru Nanak Sahib Ji, and it was the same thing. It was through Pitaji that I did my presentation. So this was, for me, very natural.
And I think actually the connection shows us the same way as the Guru, because what you mentioned to me while you were mentioning it was Paibir Singh Ji was a guide.
Yeah.
He was, and whether you look at the word guide or mentor, but it's the lesson of the individual that serves as a guide for you. In that same way that we look forward to having the Guru Teghbahadar Sahib as our guide to who's going to hold us and then also bless us. So we really look forward to hearing from you and about the Vars, the Shabads of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib. So take it from here, Nikaji.
So, I titled this Guru Teghbahadar Sahib Voices, O Mind, Transcend. And so the idea is about the mind, and we've been speaking about that throughout this conference. Particularly the last two speakers have talked about, Jasleen Kaur and Surendra have talked about the mind. What is it? So why is the mind so important? And I want to spend a little bit of time to understand why in Bani the mind is invoked. I mean, 90% of the Shabads in Bani are directed towards the mind. So let's understand this mind. The mind is the integral part of consciousness. It is faster than time and space. It is the highest faculty of the human being. And this mind, our mind, is enticed so easily by the gifts that it has forgotten the giver. It has forgotten the source. And this forgetfulness has led the mind astray, has led our mind astray. And therefore, we are unable to recognize its divinity, its origin, and therefore unable to realize our true potential. So in Anand Sahib, the third Pacha says, "E man meria tu sada rohar nale." Oh my mind, forever stay with me, with her, right? The divine. So what does that mean? How can the mind forever stay with that divinity? And, Jasleen Kaur also mentioned, every moment you be thinking about, but the mind does need to stay with the her. It needs to be trained. You cannot do this without training. And when the mind is trained, when the conscious effort is made to train the mind, to inculcate virtues, which virtues? The divine virtues, the virtues of goodness, of kindness, of compassion. And when we inculcate those, there's an awareness that enters. And that awareness brings a stillness. And when that happens, one experiences the riches of the universe, actually the ethers, everything one experiences. I mean, the Guru says, those who win their mind win the world. Man jeete jag jeet, right? So by winning your own mind, you win the entire world. So that this mind can be our best friend, or it can be our worst adversary. And an untrained mind, like Jocelyn Kaur mentioned, is like, the analogy of the dog, the stray dog, is an untrained mind. It is in constant turmoil. But those who command their own mind, and this is those who command their own mind, know consciousness. And those who know consciousness live in awareness. And they experience the vastness which is so beautifully revealed in Asakibar. But it takes courage. It takes commitment to learn to control the mind. I mean, it's definitely work. And this has been reinforced, for me at least, in the 3 Shabads of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib in Rag Dev Gandhari. And that's why, I chose those 3, or they chose me. It's not, you never choose anything. It comes to you. And if I may, I'd like to walk you through those 3 Shabads, my learnings of them, and then maybe we can, discuss them. But I've asked the organizers, to put the transcreations in the chat so that people can look at them, and I'm not, so that they can enjoy them. So if that can happen, that would be great. So in the first Shabad is Ye man nek na kahiyo kahe. The Guru Sahib describes the nature of the mind by invoking his mind. It's a beautiful poetic way of when you want to impart something of great substance, which is sensitive and which is like, listen, really listen to this. You want to soften it. So you say, oh mind, listen. Or you say, in poetry, you say, oh my heart, will you do this? Can you look at this? Or oh my eyes, what are you here to see and what are you seeing? So it's a very gentle way, which Jocelyn Kaur has also mentioned in Guru Teghbahadar Sahib's Bani. So the Guru invokes his mind to explain to us in a gentle way that this mind is refusing to listen to anything. I have been giving it instructions, but it's not listening. It is as if this mind has become tainted and is intoxicated with this razzle-dazzle of the world. And a different way of thinking has entered. The different way is durmat. So this is that different way of thinking has entered. So how can when this different way of thinking has entered, how can the mind even remember to sing the virtues of the divine or even to think about goodness? Because a different way has entered. And the Guru elaborates, deception has also entered. And the mind has become devious. And the only thing it is really thinking about is it's increasing its own worth. So the Guru equates the mind to a dog's tail that doesn't straighten, implying how can the mind listen intently to anything because it has become devious. And in the last line, the Guru instructs the mind in no uncertain terms, Kaho Nanak, Bhaj Ram Naam, Nit, Jate Kaj Sare. So remember incessantly, intently, the Naam, and I've used the translation Charma Divine for Ram, by which life objective is realized. So the last line is, but your life objective is realized. Your previous speakers, Jocelyn Kaur and Surendra Par, both said you have to have a personal connection. And when I looked at, when I was studying these, I know the Rahau is very important, and yes, it is very important, and I understand that at multiple levels, and Guru Sahib's Bani begins with the Rahau. But for me, it was really the last line of every Shabad was like crystal clear for me. This any core is what you need to do. And I want to take you on that journey a bit. So I want to emphasize in the last line, it was life objective is realized. So if you want to go through for a seeker, what is it that you need to do? The life objective is realized. So in the first Shabad, the condition of the mind is laid out. We can give the mind all sorts of instructions, but it's not going to change. The illusion is so intoxicating and enticing that the mind has hardened. And to break this pattern, to soften the mind, it's by consciously remembering the divine virtues, the qualities. Bhaj. Now, this word bhaj is very important because there's action here. It's not that you're going to just sit there and it's going to happen. No, you got to do something about it. You got to take action. You know, we always say, Jado meher hoegi. And in a lot of Shabbats, it's grace has to be there. But in these three Shabbats, I truly found that this was, you got to do it. And you got to do it now. The grace, don't worry about the grace. You just got to get with the program. And the program is, you got to remember. So we move to the second Shabad, and here in the second Shabad, the Guru again invokes his mind, and then he lists the relatives, your close, the familiar relationships, and the wife. And these are your relationships where you have a dealing with, you know, you're close to them. However much close you are to them, these relationships, which are so important to you, but the Guru says, remember, the minute the breath leaves your body, what's going to happen? They're going to say, get this body out of here because you're a ghost, which is so true. And then the Guru invokes the heart. He says, now the heart is being asked to reflect on these temporary relationships. So look, there's a shift. And the Guru says, the heart says that these temporary relationships are like a mirage which the deer sees in the desert. It's running to get that water, that illusionary water. The minute it gets there, it's gone. It runs somewhere else to get it, and then somewhere else. And ultimately, it's exhausted. And that is our mind. We think this job will get us that, this car will get us that, this promotion will get us that. And we are constantly running, but it isn't that. So in this Shabad, what the Guru is using is, at least from my understanding, is the family and close relationships are being symbolized as mirages. These entangle us and they bring us pain. And I will address the question of attachment. This is not that. This is a different kind. It's because you're attached to them, you're bound to them. And the only way to rise is by freeing ourselves. It is not to say that you don't love, but it's to being attached to that love, considering it, this is mine, which the Guru speaks about in the third Shabad. So I don't want to, go ahead. And I want the Shabad to sink in what the Guru is really saying. And the only way to free ourselves is by remembering. And in the last line, the Guru instructs the mind is that remember the Naam, incessantly remember the Naam, for that will bring freedom. Jate hot udhar. So in the first Shabad, the last line was the life objective is realized. In the second one, it is this will bring freedom. So let's, build on that to see where this is going. And in this third Shabad, the Guru addresses us the people, you and I. And the Guru articulates that he has seen that this love in this world is deceptive. Jagat mein jhuthi dekhi preet. I've seen that. And, we can think about it. The question arises, what love is the Guru referring to? And if we look at the earlier two Shabads and in this one, it is the love that is emanating from these closest relationships. Because everyone in these close relationships is really after their own comfort. Because you're here, I want to have this relationship with you because you're providing me something. You're making my life comfortable. You're giving me something. That's that attachment that Guru is talking about. If I could love you just because I love you. If I could love you just that, it would not be. But without that expectation that you're going to provide me with something, that is the love which Guru is talking about. That's why everyone's consciousness is constantly bound in that mind. What can I get from him? That's that bondage that is creating. And the Guru says, in the last breath, none of these are going to be with you. But look at this, the Guru is telling us, this is the astonishing norm, societal norm of society, of the way this life is. And yet, the mind, the ignorant mind doesn't understand this. What if the trained mind could understand this? So in the last line of the Shabad, the Guru declares the one who sings the divine songs. This will freeze oneself, which means they're no longer bound to this attachment. No longer are they beholden, and they cross the world ocean. So in the first Shabad, the last line was, life objective is realized. In the second, we went from, it comes freedom. And the third one was, we crossed the world ocean. So the direction is so clear, which Guru is giving us. We need to sing, we need to remember, because it's a conscious and a physical action. When we sing, when we remember, we understand, and we try to imbibe those divine virtues. And when this deliberate action becomes a part of our being, it weakens this intoxication, and gradually one's journey can begin. So in a nutshell, this Shabad, I mean, I'm going on because I'm so excited about, it's so clear. I mean, it's like the path is so clear that why the mind refuses to listen. And there's also the revelation, how can the mind transcend and recognize its life's objective? And the Guru gives the reason for the separation. The separation is there because the mind is intoxicated and it's with all this illusion, and therefore every action that is being performed from this deception. And the way to transcend is through singing, through this willful, conscious remembrance and singing. At first the singing is external and it is forced. And then eventually it moves within, it becomes internal, and it begins to resound on its own. And that is the mind transcending effortlessly into that next realm where things happen effortlessly and you move into different stages of your life journey. So that was the three Shabbats.
No, so well said, and with such passion.
Wow.
And with such love. One of the things while you were speaking, you mentioned was about falsehoods. And the Guru also speaks about false love. What to you is not false love in the world?
So, when we put false love, I mean, duty, they keep preet. I've seen that the preet in this world is false. So, because love cannot be false, so in that case. But I've seen that there's the so-called idea of love. So this love which is false is in bondage, there's a transaction in it. There is where score is being kept. So in a relationship, when you are able to see the divinity in each other, and when all your interactions flow from that place, that is when that is love. I want to categorically say that is love. When you see the divinity in each other, when your actions towards each other flow from that place. And that happens, that transpires when devotion enters your relationship. When that devotional element enters, you consider that relationship, that being, to be sacred. And there's a sacredness. And this sacredness, when this sacredness enters, all boundaries. You transcend all societal, each and every boundary you transcend, because what you're experiencing is of a far greater nature. And you recognize fully well, there's a recognition that this experience would not have been possible without the other being. Because that's Sangat, right? In that Sad Sangat, in that eternal Sangat, you experience something far greater that you as an individual on your own could not do that. And that to me is eternal love, because it's based on that love of continuous, and it is rooted in something higher than just the physical. It is in the mind. It is when you can say in your relationship that saying, I love you, I adore you, feels small. There's something far greater. I do not have words to describe this relationship. And even then, when there is nothing that you want or nothing that you desire, there is still that desire. I only want to be there in your presence, to breathe the air that you are breathing. I want to be at your feet, just to serve you. When that enters that relationship, the individuals know that something very, I don't want, rare is happening. It's not impossible, it's rare. And therefore, the two or the three, or whatever it is, they do anything and everything possible to honor that relationship. It's beyond right, beyond wrong. Their lives are field, and that's where you meet. You know, we can talk about this, that it doesn't happen, and I can share something. With my relationship with my mother. She was my mother, and she will be always be my mother. But at the end, our relationship transcended. While she was my mother, she was also my spiritual companion. And when she left this earthly realm, yes, there was pain. But in that pain, there was an immense gratitude. And if I can say, there was a rejoicing, because my mother's deepest wish was fulfilled the way she left. And I, as her satsangi, rejoiced that for her. I, as a child, was sad, but I, as her satsangi, said, I also want that. Like the way my mother left this earth, and like the way Guru fulfilled her wish, may Guru do that for me. So the relationship, when we talk about transcendence, when we talk about what Guru is revealing to us about attachment, it cannot be, it can definitely be, because I've had glimpses of it.
One of the things that you brought on is remembrance.
Simran.
And your feelings have shown through that remembrance is our path to love with the Guru. And obviously, the irony in this discussion for me, lesson, is how it all weaves through. The last two panel members mentioned forgetfulness as their away from the Guru. So you tie that together, it's very easy. Forgetfulness takes us away and leads us astray. Remembrance leads us to the path of the Guru. The other, during that path of remembrance, one of the other words you mentioned was gratitude. If you could speak a little bit, Inikaji, about gratitude for both the Guru and the Bani, especially in these three Shabads, that would be great.
So, we talk about remembrance, like why remember? Because I get this question asked a lot, when I'm out with, particularly, I remember this question was asked of me when I was speaking at the Pai Veer Singh Sadan. one of the young men asked me, do you think Guru is very greedy? And I'm saying, okay, help me through this. I'm saying, no, I don't think so. I said, but I would love to know why you are thinking that, because, no question is a silly question. It is obviously there's something on this young man's mind. And he said, well, the Guru is always asking us to praise Guru. And that's, we've been talking about praise throughout this entire, sing the virtue, sing that. And I said, it isn't about that. It is, yes, it is so that we can remember our divine qualities, is to really Simran, is to feel that presence so that it prevents us. It is that shawl. It is our protection. So we don't go towards something which is unkind. Because when we feel the presence, and that's when we encounter the source. That is when we encounter the beautiful. And remembrance and Simran really is the glorification of life. This is where you can appreciate the physical attributes and the beauty of life. And if I may say so, and be so bold, you can also experience the metaphysical. And from Simran, through Simran, with Simran, a universal being emerges, a being that accepts pain and pleasure, praise and criticism, family and adversary, wealth and the absence of wealth in the same manner. The only distinction for this being, for this transcendent being, is between the transient and the eternal. And Guru Teghbahadar Sahib's compositions, all of them, really strengthen the individual so that they can experience their full human potential while living in this world. And this is transcendence. This is liberation and the ultimate freedom. And you talk about shukrana. It comes from that. It's when you are filled. That's the thing that comes out. Because there is nothing else but shukr. Inni meher hoi hai ki I cannot even begin to tell you. I mean, Jasjit ji, you spoke so movingly in the beginning when you introduced Harinder Singh that, his inspiration or Guru Meher, your journey. And I can relate to that because that's been my journey too. I categorically say I was a dry twig by the wayside. Nobody cared. Nobody even bothered to look. And this twig thought also knew was totally unworthy. And somehow, I have no idea how, grace. And this grace is continuing, but the grace was with this one line. Man tu jyot saroop hai, apna mool pehchan. And it was like, am I being told that I have a spark of divine light? That I am worthy? And that was the turning point. So how can someone who has given you life, and you talk about gratitude to Guru and Bani, and someone who has given you that life, that sense of being, that you are worthy, how the gratitude just flows. There's nothing, nobody can do that for you. And when you talk about, Bani for me is very real. It's not abstract. It is honestly it's like tip tip verse amrit tara. It is that stream of nectar which is constantly flowing, drip by drip, and enriching you. And it is that beauty. I mean, and the Guru says, these are the, in the Guru Granth Sahib, these are the revelations of the 35, 37 contributors. These are their experiences. And I'm saying, Guru, honestly, you got me because I want to experience those. So I'm really with you right now.
What a great, real, like a true expression of remembrance, of Simran, of gratitude, and how that came into your life. I think for all of us who are on this discussion today, and for all of us who are hearing it, I think that's what we're all looking for. And you provided us, all the speakers today so far have provided us a pathway to be on the remembrance and gratitude side and away from the forgetfulness side. And I think that's just as you saw Paivir Singh as a guide, all of us look at these kind of lessons that we'll take away from today as guides for our future. So thank you for sharing that because it came from really your soul. And that is the other aspect that comes to mind today, and that is we've spoken a lot about the physical attributes and challenges of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib. We've spoken a lot about the emotional challenges that he faced, family, community, as well as the larger level, and now also about the soul at the spiritual level. And in Punjabi, we rohaniyat. And that's what we're all seeking, is spiritual connection to Guru Sahib, to Akal Purkh. And that's what you've just shown us, how that can be achieved. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else, Inigoji, you'd like to share with the audience today about remembrance, about Simran, or about your own search for those?
You know, in your earlier discussion with Jocelyn Kaur and Surendra, there was a mention that you spoke a lot about virag. And we also say the Bani of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib is virag, and but Bani general is mostly that the theme of virag is very much there. But before virag, there is another stage. Virag is an intense longing. One cannot get to virag if one doesn't have berha. Berha is separation. It is when you feel that there is a sense of separation, that there is something missing in your life. It is then you begin this quest, that what is it that I am missing? That it is. So, to talk about virag without the berha, we cannot make that connection. And when that longing is so intense, when that berha, that sense of separation is so intense, that will lead you to the longing, because that separation and longing, there will be something that will guide you to take the next part. Your focus is only on getting that. What is it that I am missing? And for me, if I may, because you have invoked, it was, if life was just eating, drinking, and procreating, this life was not worth living. There had to be something more. And what was that more? What was it that I am seeking? What was it that I'm missing? And that began that journey of looking, searching, and I would say walked down many paths, but the head fell here. The head fell here.
That's so interesting, because you brought us back to where we started, forgetfulness. And that separation caused by forgetfulness is actually the root of our beginning to coming for the Guru. So that's really enlightening that we come back to our starting point from this in this discussion. This has been such an enriching, enlightening experience for myself, and I can see from the comments on the chat room, listening to everyone and engaging with the SikhRI researchers. It'll be, I think everyone is interested from SikhRI, what is coming next? What can we expect in the next coming months as we move these commemorations forward?
Right. Yeah. Thank you for everything. I mean, honestly, I must share with everyone that the entire SikhRI team, I mean, not only the researchers, but the graphics and the video production, and everyone at SikhRI has been totally immersed in the Bani of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib and the history and doing all this. So what are we looking forward to? Well, we are moving into Vaisakhi, right? So we are going to be having the 13 days of inspiration, Vaisakhi inspiration from our SikhRI family. So you can look forward to that. We are going to be having our webinars, which will continue. The 14th, we'll have a very special webinar, and the programs will continue, as you will see in the slides which we've put together. But there are two things which I want to really share with the audience is we are really excited about. And next month, we are launching the Salok Mahla Nova, the Bani of Guru Sahib. And that's going to be really exciting, and we're looking forward to that. So I'm hoping everyone, looks at the website, which is right up there right now, and delves into this Bani. And the second thing is that we are launching 3 new K-12 curriculums, and they will enhance our already robust curriculums which we have for this particular age group. So these 3 educational resources will be great. We'll be doing the life and the teachings of Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, so that our youngsters, our children, can really appreciate the Guru in that light as the way it is. So that is what we are going to be, you will be expecting for us, besides, many more other things which we will keep continuing doing. But these are our major launches so far. I mean, who knows what the middle of the year will bring. I have a board. We have a board that will say, I mean, that you're on the advisory board. We have a board will say, well, you need to change gear. We need something like this. So we change gear and we bring things along as well. So that's the exciting part from SikhRI, and that's what we have. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm confident everyone will be looking forward to it, and the board will be fully supportive of everything that you and the SikhRI team are doing to bring it forth to the Sangat. As we've seen the engagement in the Sangat today, I hope that over social media, that Sangat engagement continues. It's amplified, and that essence and engagement, that feeling of connection to the Guru continues to improve for our Sangat. Thank you for that excellent presentation.
Yeah. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. As we go to the next segment of our program, it'll be Kulveer Singh Ji, who will join us, our Executive Director of Sikh Research Institute. Kulveer Singh Ji, I want to ask you, how are you feeling at the moment based on the discussions of the last few hours? As
one of the first of all, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. As one of the commenters in the chat just said, the time has just flown by. This is one of those things where you spent months planning, and the event itself is in hours, but it just flies by, because I think the insights and the conversation has been so rich. I'm feeling, of course, inspired. I'm also feeling very blessed and grateful for the day that we have, for the organization we have, for the team that's been able to put this event on. Harinder Singh often coaches us not to say we're very proud, because that gets us into problems. So I'll avoid that word, but blessed and grateful that I think that today has given us such a sense of dimensionality around Guru Teghbahadar Sahib. I think often in kind of contemporary Sikh narratives, Guru Teghbahadar is presented a bit one-dimensionally, right? There's just the highlights of his life, and kind of his later life is presented, and I think today has provided so much context, diving into his Bani, which and beyond Salok Mahla Nova. and some of the key concepts I've provided there. So I feel really, this has it's added so much color to my relationship with Guru Teghbahadar that I'm going to have to dwell and reflect on this for a while to come.
Thank you very much, Kulveer Singh Ji, and thank you for your leadership. All the time you volunteered for Sikh Research Institute in the past. And we hope we continue to count on your leadership as in the future as well, and staying engagement. On what I wanted to reflect on during this conference that happened today, one of the things that I want to try and see if I can, in my own words, bring it forth, is that transformation. We've talked a lot about remembrance, what takes us away from the Guru, what brings us closer to the Guru. How did the Guru live that in his own life, in being away from the family, away from his community, and then being a leader around South Asia for the community and for his family. For myself, that transformation of consciousness is what I was looking for during this event. And at the end of this day, I can honestly say I won't be transformed, but the pathway and the guides that were mentioned earlier today on that transformation of consciousness. It's so hard because we look at the material world in front of us all the time. God and Akal Purkh is zara zara, pal pal. And for us to recognize that essence in zara zara, pal pal, we need a guide and a path to be away from the worldly and into that zara zara and pal pal of the stream of consciousness of Akal Purkh. And what I heard today allows me to come closer, will hopefully allow others to come closer to that as well. This was, well, everyone did an outstanding job in preparing and presenting. And what I feel is, and again, the quality of SikhRI is the essence. The essence came forward as a feeling of the Guru in ourselves.
Yeah,
really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I think, you set the tone at the beginning of this conference, which was we are centered on the Guru, inspired by the Guru, scholars and researchers and lovers of the Shabd, but also walkers on the path. And what I enjoyed today was not just the presentations, but the interaction you had with the speakers, where there was a little bit of letting down of the guard and a little bit of sharing. And you started that at the beginning, talking about your transformation to date, in terms of not just your outward appearance, but your inner connection to the Guru. And I think this is today was really showcasing SikhRI at its finest, that we are not there to tell you what to think as a Sikh. We are there to give you the tools, the knowledge, the data points, the inspiration for you to develop your own way of how to think as a Sikh, how to feel as a Sikh, how to love as a Sikh, how to engage in the world as a Sikh, and most importantly, how to develop your own relationship with Guru. We're not here to be the intermediary. We say illuminating your path is our tagline. Every person is at a different point in their journey. And our job is, at our best, we are as big a tent as possible and as inclusive as possible and as diverse as possible, where every person has a place and every person can hopefully take something away from a conference or an event like this and apply it back to their own lives. I think often my definition of success of an event like this for me is, are some of my questions that I came to this event with, were they answered? Good. But most importantly, were there certain questions raised that I hadn't even considered? That's where the growth is going to come from. And oh boy. And that's what I find that, especially with Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, every time I reflect on the Barney, there's a new level. It's like like they say, the layers of the onion, the next level gets revealed. And I find that just in the last concept, last conversation you had with Inni talking about virag and going from birha to virag, such a beautiful concept, such a powerful concept. And Guru Teghbahadar Sahib, his entire life in his Bani is a demonstration of freedom through submission, which sounds counterintuitive, but every act was that. He was free in every realm by submitting to Ekmon God. So I find that today was just such a reflection, I think, of what we are trying to aspire to as an organization. And you saw that in the diversity of the speakers, the diversity of the topics, but the common thread of the conversation that took place today.
Great. Thank you for those thoughts, Kulveer Singh. On behalf of SikhRI, I want to thank everyone here who joined our conference today. Thank you to the Legend team that worked so hard on the technical side. And as we know, I made some mistakes on the technical side. I forgot the times of one presentation, had to flip through pages. Technical sides are very difficult in this world to keep up because of you're all over the world and the human connection is limited. All of it has an impact. Thank the Legend team. Most of all, I want to thank the board of SikhRI for their support, their ongoing dedication to the community, the Sangat, and as to the commitment that's needed for this long-term effort at inspiring and transforming all the Sikhs around the world into their own path of connection to the Guru and Vani. Thank you everybody for joining us. Wishing everyone a great day, great evening, great night, wherever you may be. And once again, thanks to all panelists, all participants who worked so hard, put their heart and soul into it. I really appreciate it, and the feeling which they brought out for everyone. Absolutely. Wishing everyone a great day, and thanks to everyone for bringing this together. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.